Alright, so I was asked to do a review on a $11 tournament I played last night on the Winning Poker Network. Winning Poker Network does cater to US players. The major clients, or poker clients from the Winning Poker Network, are Black Chip Poker, America's Card Room, True Poker, and Poker Host. I am currently using Poker Host as my client of choice for the Winning Poker, and what is what this tournament was played on. However, your choice of client really does not matter too much. So the tournament in question is an $11 game. The tournament went on 454 hands. There was about 260 entries in it, and I did take first in this tournament, so it went on quite some time. Let's highlight all of these, make sure you have all hands set. To replay all. If you have a lot of hands, it may give you a warning. This may take a second. I doubt it's going to take too long. They're just text files. So again, this is not live. This is a replay of the tournament from the saved hand history files that Hold'em Manager 2 Heads Up Display program has saved. So this is the Hold'em Manager 2 replayer. This tournament was played last night. But we will be able to go through every hand at my own pace, and we will explain what was done and why, point out any errors. It's always good to go through some deep tournament caches for any poker player. It allows you to view your decisions and have as much time as you need to look fully through them, as well as see what the final outcome was and replay it backwards to totally get a feel of what happened. So most of these hands we're going to be skipping through. Again, there's 450 hands, so I can't expect to explain everything. But let's begin. So 610 obviously would have been a fold. Here the blinds start nice and small, 5K starting stacks for $11. I must have joined this tournament in late registration because if the tournament had just started, every player would be at 5K chip stacks. Since everyone's pretty close, I would say it was pretty too far into late registration. 610 would be a fold, Ace 8 would be a fold there, 5-7 would be a fold, Ace 7 early position would be a fold, King's fold. Most of what you do in poker is folds. However, I did get Ace Ace in the big blind here early, so of course be a play. So we have a 2.6 times big blind raise. Usually you count it as a multiple of the big blind, is how you view raises. So this is about 2.6 times the big blind, roughly. And we get a call. So it's going to come over to me. At this point, if you call, it's pretty weak. So a call would be ill-advised here. You don't really want to see three people with a flop. If they have a pocket pair or face cards, you can easily hit two pair, 3 times set on you. So you really want to protect your hand. Ace Ace, of course, is the best hand in poker. You will get dealt it 1 in 220 hands, statistically. So I do expect I raised here. I would make the raise semi-sizable. It doesn't need to be huge because you don't want to bluff them off of it, but it does need to be enough where you're building the pot and also protecting your hand from sets, 2 pair, things like that. So I did raise to 620. I think that's adequate. It's roughly a little bit under 3 times their raise. So for a 3-bet, it's considered a 3-bet or a re-raise because this was the first bet is considered the big blind. This was considered the second bet, and this is called a 3-bet. I think it's adequate. So let's see what's on here. This is also called a squeeze play. This is a more advanced concept in poker. A squeeze play is when you squeeze the initial raiser in between a caller and your raise. And the benefit of a squeeze play is this guy is sitting here and he sees there's 2 other people in the pot. The pot's getting raised aggressively, so he needs a really strong hand to continue on in this hand. So a lot of times he has to fold because he's looking at a 3-way pot and aggression. And so you're squeezing him in between the caller and yourself. So this guy has to have a really strong hand to continue. And this guy just called this raise. If he had a really strong hand, aces, kings, queens, ace, queen, he most likely would 3-bet this raise. So therefore he likely has a mediocre hand, king, queen, ace, jack, 9-9, things of that nature. And when I 3-bet that usually means he would fold here as well. So the squeeze play can often be done kind of bluffy to get fold equity on these two. But again, that is an advanced concept that you do not really need to know in poker. You get a 4-bet immediately from the initial raiser down here. I expect Kid for a mock to turn tail and run at this point. If he had a really strong hand, he would have re-raised the initial bet, not called it, but he called it, and now I raised that, and then there's a 4-bet. So, I mean, he's looking here thinking someone's got aces or kings at this point, so he is going to almost 100% of the time fold here, and he does. At this point, this guy's pot committed himself. It's early in the tournament. I don't see me, if I shove all in, that he's going to fold, because he's already put 1800 out there. If I did think he might fold, if I overjammed, I might not just jam all in here. But I fully expect a call because he's pot committed himself at this point. So it's fine just to put ace-ace all in at this point. What he could have, I mean, jacks, queens, kings, ace-king, ace-queen. I mean, ace-king or ace-queen would be an overplay here. The only proper things where the moves he's made are correct poker would probably be queen-queen or king-king, and that's it. Even jack-jack, he probably should not be 4-betting this. So unless he has queen-queen or king-king, this is improper play. So let's see what he has. He does call. Again, he was pot committed, 100 out of 100 times. He's pretty much going to call there once he's made that 4-bet. And he does have ace-king. It's a slight overplay with ace-king. Usually you want to see a flop and see if you hit it or not. But early on in an $11 tournament, we both have 5K chips, which is what you started with. I am of the opinion you should play pretty aggressively, and you either double up early, or you bust out and you just rebuy and do it again until you do double up early. And once you double up, you have the large stack at the table. You could use that to abuse the rest of the players at the table for the duration of the tournament. So I am a strong advocate of playing kind of aggressive on that initial 5K stack, especially when there is rebuy option available, or re-entry is the correct term. You could re-enter into this tournament if you bust out, if it is still in registration, so for another buy-in. So I think he overplayed his ace-king a little bit. It's not too bad. So that nice and early in this tournament, it sets us up on a double stack size. Moving on. King queen here will be a play, unless there's some extreme aggression. And under the gun min raise in cash games, especially live cash games, you have an option to do what's called a straddle. This is an intricate poker rule that many even Hold'em players aren't familiar with. It is a cash game move. You have the option to min raise the big blind before you even see your cards. In tournament poker, you do not have this option, so he saw his cards before he min raised, but it's still a common thing that is done where you just min raise under the gun, and it kind of is basically saying, all right, well, I'm going to steal the big blind, and I'm going to be the super big blind now, and this guy's going to be the big blind, and this is the small blind. And so instead of acting first, it's really you're deferring to act last. But again, in tournament, he did see his card before doing this. So you do have to anticipate something other than a random hand, like a small pocket pair or two face cards. Call, I do not agree, or the fold, I do not agree with here. I don't know, it's possible that I just had multiple tables going and didn't see it. But this is certainly worth a call of 120 here for the equity of hitting a king or queen or two pair set. So I would classify that as a mistake. I think that should have been called, especially since the king hit. It doesn't matter the outcome that happens. What matters was the equity at the point you made your decision. So I mean, you could fold 2-7, 2-2-2 comes out. It doesn't mean it was the wrong play. So it doesn't matter if the king's there. But still, I stand by that should have been. Again, I could get into analysis of what these players are doing, what I think they have and why, but it's not my hand at this point, and I still have a good number of hands to go, so I will refrain from doing that. King 5 would be a fold, 9-4 would be a fold, King Queen should be a play. Again, I mean, it's the second time I folded king queen. He's only min raising. He's a pretty tight player. It's worth the call 160 nice and early in this tournament. You have pretty good odds later when the blinds are up steep. It depends on how many chips you have. But this early, I think you can more than justify the call of 160 chips with equity of 2-pair sets straight with king queen, things like that. So I would classify this as a second mistake made. Again, it's possible I just was not paying attention or timed out. This replay does not show the timing of the game. So if someone tanks and thinks a long time or times out, this replay will not show that. It will just show that they folded. Seven four is correct fold there, especially after the raise. Ace four would be a fold. 7-7 should probably be a play. 3x is, I mean, it's a little strong. You could do 260. I advocate like a 2.6 times raise of the big blind as standard. It'll exercise pot control, keep it smaller for you. You'll have just about the same fold equity, and it saves you some chips, especially when you get later in the tournament. So, but a big part of it is laziness. It's easy to hit the ×3 button on the table and just do a ×3 bet, whereas at 2.6 you have to type it in. So in terms of laziness, you see the 3x quite often. However, a 2.6 to 2.7 times big blind is more ideal. Jack 3 will be a fold. I presume that's folded. Folds. Folds. Again, I can tell I didn't touch these hands by the chip count staying static. Fold, folds. It's under the gun is likely a fold. Yeah, I mean, I was in the big blind. I saw the flop for free. He didn't really hit it, so just check fold. There's no reason to do anything here other than check fold. Fold, 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 fold. 9-9, probably a play. Yeah, I don't know about this. You should probably min raise this. Min raise is probably the most adequate because you don't really care that the big blind's going to call. It's your equity with 9-9 here is if you're going to hit a 9, because almost always a card higher than a 9 is going to come 10, Jack, Queen, King, or Ace, and then you're not going to know where you're at. So the only thing you really want to play this for is value for set. You'll hit a set 1 in 7 times. So I do think a min raise here would be justified. At least the limp. Even at 2.6 raise, if you want to play the rest, would be fine too. But I would not fold this. If you are ever going to fold it, would be under the gun. First position to act here is the worst position. But I would say this is likely a slight error as well. 9-9 should have been played. Yeah, I would have put this straight if I had continued on that long, which may or may not have. 4-9 would be a fold, King 2 would be a fold, King 10 would be a fold, so King's L6 fold. Most of what you do in poker is fold. Ace in the big blind. We did skip through about 10 hands there of being card dead. It's the second ace we got. Again, you get dealt ace once every 220 hands. So the fact that we've seen it twice now in the last 47 hands is doing pretty well. You'll see every pocket pair once in 220 hands. Let's back this up a bit. I'm in the big blind 150. We get a limp. Limp is just a flat call of the blind. The small blind completes. At this point, you have to raise these aces. 1, you need to start building a pot. 2, you need to protect your aces, especially in a 3-way pot. This is just too easy. If they have a small pocket pair, you have to hit a set. If you have a 2-pair, you really need to raise it up and protect your hands and make sure the odds for them continuing on are in your favor, not theirs. So I do anticipate I raise this. I do 380 is a little light. 380 is not really going to ever get a fold, so it accomplishes that it's increasing the pot like you want, because you have to be ahead here. You're the best hand in poker. So it accomplishes building the pot, but it does not accomplish protecting your hand much, because 9 times out of 10 they're both going to call this bet because it's so small. So in retrospect, this bet should be more about 410, 420, if not up to 450-ish, 470. of a size. So with this small bet, I would anticipate they both call and continue on, which they do. So the flop is pretty dry in poker. If the flop was all diamonds and it was 8-9 jack, it would be considered a wet flop or a draw heavy flop. You could have the flush draws or straights. This would be considered a dry flop. There's no flush draw possibilities. There's slight straight possibilities, but unlikely. So this is a pretty good flop for me. The only thing I would really be worried about from this flop is an 8-8 or 2-2. 8-jack wasn't played. So 8-8 or 2-2 would really be it. Jack-jack, he wouldn't have limped. This guy would not have completed. Jack-jack, they would have raised. So that's it. 8-8 and 2-2 are the only concerns of mine. Still, if they do have another pocket pair like 6-6, 7-7, 5-5, if they hit that on the turn, you're in trouble. So you still have to be betting this pretty aggressively, rebuilding the pot and protecting your hands. And I bet at 2/3 pot. And they both fold. So. So this guy bets, it's a little bit under, it's like a 2.7 times raise. You are in the small blind, so you'd be first to act post flop. It's just not really worth messing around with. So I do anticipate a fold of this. You really just want to be the aggressor. And if I call ace-10 here, I'm going to be first to act. I'm not really going to know where I'm at in the hand. You easily have ace-jack, ace-queen. So it's just better from this spot. Even if you could squeeze positive equity out of it, you could just wait for a more positive equity spot to get you in. 7-king would be a fold, 9-queen would be a fold, 2-4 fold. Jack-queen, it's borderline. Now that the guy min raises, I probably folded it, but yeah. Let's fold. Ace-king suited again, you could do a 2.6 or 2.7. Early on in the tournament, I'm usually kind of lazy and just do it 3 times. And then later on in the tournament, when the blinds are much heavier and worth a lot more, I tend to get unlazy. So we do get one call. I don't think I really explained these statistics here, but these are the statistics I was viewing at the time of the hand. In red is just their name, Bronx 175, or abbreviation of their name, first 4 letters. Blue, the number of hands you have on that player. If you only have 5 or 6 hands, you know your statistics are not accurate. If you have a few hundred hands, you know you're getting a more accurate read of how they play. This number here is the VPIP, or voluntarily put money in pots percentage. So it's basically what percentage of hands they play. So this guy plays 32% of his hands. It's quite a significant amount. He plays a lot. The number next to that is PFR percentage, or pre-flop raise percentage. So of these hands you play, of this 32% of hands you play, what percentage of those were you raising pre-flop and being aggressive? So this player, right away, you know he plays 32% of his hands. And of that 32%, a full 26% of it is him raising up pre-flop and being aggressive. So you know he is likely a loose aggressive player just from looking at that. And then even to confirm that more, this number is the aggression factor. His aggression factor is extremely high. It should be really high for good players. So I do expect he's an okay player, despite him having really loose VPIP. So I would say he is a loose aggressive player, but it's probably okay based on the statistics. And the flop comes with the flop, but I do have a strong draw. Any ace or king or heart will be great. So in these situations, I have equity of hitting a heart, equity of hitting ace or king, and then in addition to that, I will bet so that you have fold equity of when they fold and you just gain all the chips. And then that also serves a double purpose of when you do hit an ace or a king or a heart, you've been building the pot so that you have a lot more money in. So I do anticipate I made a sizable bet here, at least half pot of what I would say 830 at least. And I bet 2/3 pot is fine as well. We get a call. I mean, you could be calling with a lot of things: 8-8, 9-9, Jack-Jack, Queen-Queen, Ace-Ace, or King-King. You'd have raised pre. You could be calling with 2 overcards. So still a lot of things in his range. King is a great card for me. I'm still thinking I'm pretty well ahead, even if I don't hit my flush. I think the king is probably still ahead of what he has. Could he have a 10? Sure. If he had a 10, he might have raised there on the flop, but not quite, because it was a pretty good play. So a lot of times he would just float the call of the 10. But at this point, even if he has a 10, if you hit a heart, you still beat him, and this is early on in the tournament, so I do expect I played this rather aggressively. I bet a full half pot. Bet, I think that's adequate. Because if he calls, the dynamics are still right, where you could shove all of your stack in without overbetting the pot. You don't really want to overbet the pot to rare. It just screams that you're extremely strong. So you want to think before you make this bet. If I bet half and he calls, will the pot be enough for I to jam the rest of my stack in if I wish to? And the answer is yes. So this half pot bet is adequate. And he folds anyway. So that puts us up to 2.4 times the starting stack pretty early in the tournament, 55 hands in. So we're in pretty good position already, not too far into this tournament. We had a min raise under the gun. I might call this just because it's 200 more chips, and I do. Just for, really it's just for 2-pair equity, 3-of-a-kind equity, or flush equity. If you hit just 1 pair, you're likely not going to continue with a6, just not worth it. And completely whiff the flop, and I will be getting away from it at this point. You can argue a call for set value here. You hit a set 1 in 7 times. The implied odds, however, are not my 12k chips. It's this guy's 4,400. So even if I hit a 5 and get all in, which is a big if, and that's only hit 1 in 7 times, and then you only get it all in even less than that, I would only make 12 times something like the amount to call. So it's 300 to call, and you make 12 times that. You hit your set 1 in 7, but you need about roughly 1 in 15 odds to make it profitable. So this is probably actually a fold. It wouldn't be completely profitable call, would it? Queen queen on the button. Yeah, I remember this hand. I timed out actually. So there's no excuse for this. Playing, don't time out hands like queen queen. You just can't afford to give up spots like this. So this game it happened to work out anyway. I still went on to take this tournament down, but it's difficult when you're timing out on hands like queen queen. So that's obviously an incorrect fold. King king 2 hands later. Standard 3x is fine. Again, 2.6 times bet is probably a little more adequate. I get 3-bet pretty sizably as well by the same guy that I had a history with before. So sometimes they get annoyed and try to play you back at you a little bit more than normal when you have history with them. Also, one of the last number here that I did not go over is the 3-bet percentage right here. So this is how often do they, when you raise pre-flop, you get re-raised. So usually it's a really small number. As you see, mine's not even listed here. But most players are about 5 to 7% of the time. His is all the way up to 21%. So you see he 3-bets a lot. So because of that, I don't give this 3-bet much credit. And the only thing ahead is ace-ace anyway. You have the second best hand in poker. So I'm prepared at this point to get as much money in as I can. So whether to call or raise, you probably, let's see what these blinds, both blinds hold. You probably want to raise here with kings, just because if an ace comes out, it's going to suck. So you probably want to re-raise it. There's good chances going all in anyway, especially if he's already 3-betting. Most of the time they're just going to the felt. So he's probably got like jack, jack, queen, queen. Could have ace, ace. There's no reason to rule that out. Ace, queen. Ace, king is unlikely because I have the 2 kings. So I would say jack, jack, queen, queen, ace, ace, or an overplay with ace, queen is what this guy has. If he has ace, queen, it's definitely an overplay. And I don't muck around with it. I'm not sure about this. You might want to, it's questionable. It's hard to make a raise on this 1800 that doesn't fully commit you And then that just looks, if I bet 5k of my 10k chips, it just looks so strong because I'm betting half my stack. I know I'm committed, but it looks like I'm not trying to maximize my fold equity. If I bet 5k, it looks like I'm fully committing myself. It looks like I know I'll get all my chips in, but it looks like I'm trying to get him to play along. And if I was scared or weak, I would have jammed because I want him to kind of maximize my fold equity and want him to fold. So yeah, I think it's an alright shove. I think raising might actually make you look a lot stronger than shoving here. So I think this is fine to shove over, and he does call. Let's see what he has. Again, I forget what he had, but again, based on his play, the 4-bet pre-flop, I would put him on Jack-Jack. At this point, unlikely because Jack came. Queen-Queen is still very likely Ace-Ace, so most likely Ace-Ace or Queen. And then an overplay of Ace-Queen is still possible. Of course, Ace-King is possible, but unlikely because I have 2. Jack-Jack's possible, but unlikely because the Jack's here. So the 3 most likely hands at this point, I would say, are Queen-Queen, Ace-Ace, or an overplay with Ace-Queen. So the only thing that beats me at this point in that is Ace-Ace. He could have had Jack-Jack, but and he did have Ace-Queen, so that was an overplay. You should not have 4-bet Ace-Queen pre-flop. You definitely want to call that and see a flop, because then he would have seen the 5-Jack too, and he would have gotten away from it instead of handing me a bunch of chips here. This is like a $50 pot, so instead of handing me 25 bucks, he would have seen the flop, and he would have been able to get away from it. So this is a mistake, and at this point I would say this player is not that good. So that would be my estimation on him. He does play a lot of his hands, and he does play them aggressively, but generally you'd want an aggression factor almost as high, but less hands played. So this right away puts us in a great position in this tournament. I am the chip leader at this table. I don't know about the whole tournament because you can't see you play, but we're in a pretty good position. So Jack 8 will probably be a fold there. There's just no reason to touch it. 10 Queen will be a fold. No reason to touch it. 8-5. No reason to touch it. This is correct because the effective stack size is not my 24k. It's this guy's 4,600 at this point. So when he bets 600 and there's 180 out here, and I have 200 in the blind, there's like 1,000 chips already in, and he only has 4k left. So just overbet his stack size and commit him to going all in here pre-flop before we even see a flop is the correct play. It doesn't matter if you jam or bet like 5 or 6k. And he folds, surprisingly. So most likely it was just a blind steal attempt from him, and he got caught, and folding got away from it. I would not advocate trying to bet smaller than putting them all in here. It's just not really worth it. Presume I fold now that the under the gun raise occurred. This would be a fold. So I could do a fold, folds, 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 folds. This would be a fold. Folds, folds. Third time we got aces in this tournament and 75 hands, so he's running rather well, and kings as well. Again, you'll see any pocket pair once every 220 hands. The min raise here is questionable. Generally, you want to raise. This is a 2 times raise of the blind. Generally, you want to raise 2.5 to 2.6. The min raise far too often. He's going to call with any 2 cards. And then if he has any 2 cards, he could hit 2 pair on the flop. He could hit 3 of a kinds, flushes, straights. It's just, so really, I would say this is probably a slight mistake, and that this raise should be 550 minimum or more, but not more than 750. Actually too high. I would say 550 to 700 should be the size of this raise. And again, that's because it is 2.6 times the big blind is recommended. 3 times I think is a little too much, generally. And as you see, we already get a family pot. I mean, my min raise was conducive to seeing a family pot or multiple people see the pot. I'm surprised the big blind folded for just 250 more chips. Almost any 2 cards you have here is worthwhile to call at this point because there's so many people in the pot. So this probably should be a call with almost any 2 cards. It's a really tight player though. He only plays 9% of his hands, so that's why. But again, I think it should have been between 550 and 700. 3 fish hooks come out is a pretty damn good flop for me. I mean, I don't expect anyone to have the last jack. If anyone else has a pocket pair, you know, they're going to be stacking off now because they have a house. Even overcards I might still get value from, because if they hit, they'll make the house. But you do have to bet and protect your hand, and you can't just be checking giving away free cards. So I do think a half pot bet is adequate. I mean, we're still on track to get a sizable pot or people all in if needed. So I think this is adequate to try to not chase people away while still protecting your hand. I get min raised, and the big stack folds out, so that moves the effective stack once this guy folded down to 6k more. You could just jam them all in here. It is pretty strong. If you want to call and try to limp them along, you might be justified in doing that as well. I don't remember, but I think either play is appropriate. I would probably lean towards just putting them all in here. If he's making a 3-bet for a third of a stack, he's pretty much signaling that he's going to go all in. So I would just put them all in right here. I didn't though, I called, which is surprising. So again, I think either is fine. If you want to try string one, get him to put more in. But I think he would have called if we went all in right here. So I think this should have just been an all-in check. And I check and he checks behind, which gives him a free card, which is what you do not want when you're trying to slow play. So at this point, I would classify this as a mistake. It should have been raised all in there. And pre-flop, it probably should have been 550 to 700 bet. Again, hindsight is 2020. You'll always see these types of things when you're going over your poker tournaments. So at this point, I have to try to salvage the situation. Now that I gave him a free card, I obviously think I'm still in the lead. There's no more draw equity though. There never really was any draw equity though. But on the turn, at least if you had like ace king or king queen, you could think you might hit one. Or in the river, all cards are known, so there's no more draw equity on the river. So you really want to be taking advantage of that draw equity on the river on the turn. So there should have been a bet on the turn. But at this point, you need to try to salvage it and get more value out of it. So a half pot bet is fine. Betting 2/3 pot to try to get them all in would have been fine as well. It does call. I'm not sure if it'll show what he had. It doesn't. So on the merge network, when they muck their cards at the showdown here, you have the right to see what so this would be displayed on Winning Poker Network. When you muck your cards at the showdown, it is anonymous and it is not disclosed what you had. So we're not going to know what he had, unfortunately. But that does put us in a great position, up to a 30k stack. Is the dominating stack at the table by far. It protects us because I could go all in versus this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. So 5 people at the table, and it would barely dent me. So even if I run into a cooler is where you get king, someone else gets ace, it's just, you know, you played it right, they played it right, and you just get the worst side of it. I'm pretty well protected. So the only coolers I can run into that would really harm me is from Bronx or Pastor Chef. So my stack is pretty well protected at this point. I built a big stack, and you could use that to abuse the rest of the game, the rest of the tournament. So it's really nice to build these stacks early because it can be used to your advantage to really coast it all the way to the end. 4-4. I mean, you could justify a call here for 250 chips. If you want to fold at your early position, it doesn't hurt. You're really not losing much equity. Even if this is plus equity, which it probably is to call, I mean, you could also wait for more plus equity spots. But technically, if I had to lean one way or the other, I would probably say this should have at least been lent for 250 chips for set value for when you hit a 4. 4-4 next hand as well. This guy min raises. He's only got 2,600 chips left. You know, I would almost just put him all in. You want to at least call for set equity. But if you call and you miss, you're probably going to want to fold. Right now, I would just put this guy all in, probably. I mean, you have a pocket pair. Pocket pair is 50-50 to any overcards. He's only got 3k chips. That's probably what I would do. I went the call route. If you go the call route here, once you see a flop, if you miss, you kind of want to get away from that. Whereas if you want to go the aggressive route and put your money in, it should have been pre-flop. So at this point, I would expect a check fold since I made the call instead of a shove pretty. He checks behind. When he checks behind, it does signal that he doesn't have anything. So, I mean, you can make an argument to make a small stab at this here. It's only like 3 or 4k at most, so probably I'm not really too concerned with this hand or paying too much attention to it. So, if I had lean one way or the other here, I'd probably say you could probably make a stab at it at this point, because if he had a king or a jack, or even a 7, when he's this short stacked, he would have bet that flop, not checked it. So he basically told us that he doesn't have anything, and therefore a bet here would be appropriate. I don't know if he made that now. I checked, so I would have made a small bet here. He's pretty much saying he doesn't have anything. At this point, you make a weak full house. I would bet for some value. You might call with an ace high. Would be the only thing behind you we call. When you bet on the river, there has to be things they will call with that are worse than what you have. So if he's not going to call with anything but a 7 or a king, then there's no reason to bet, because he's only going to call with 7 and king, and I'm going to lose that bet, or he's going to fold with worse, and I'm going to get that bet back. So there's only negative equity from that bet. So when you make a river bet, there has to be things worse that he will call with. So the only thing worse than what I have is ace high, really. I'm not going to entertain the idea of 2-2 or 3-3. It's just unlikely. So the only thing really worse that he might call with is ace high. Might he call ace high? Maybe, because there's 3 jacks out there. He probably doesn't get any credit for hitting a pair at this point, except just 7 jacking. So you could argue and make a half pot bet here to get value out of ace high as well. He probably would have called ace high, and he does have ace high. So I mean, if I bet half pot there, he probably would have called. So I think some equity was left in this situation right here. Could have played a little better. This call's fine. That one's of course folds. Once this guy raises like this, I mean, he's asking you to call 700. He does have 20 times at 700 behind, so actually, technically for set value, you can make an argument it's worth it for set value. And if you hit a 3, you try to get as much in as you can. And if you miss your 3, you get away. So if I had to lean one way or the other, I would say you probably should call this for set value, because he has 20 times that amount, and that's a little bit above the threshold where I would do it. But if you had less chips, your implied odds are lower. The total you can make is lower. So if you had less chips, it would not be worth it. If you had more chips, it would be more worthwhile, because you have more to make when you hit your 3. So I think a fold is fine as well, though, when it's 1-20, and I do fold. You can make an argument to call here, because this guy would shove later than ace-8, but then this guy's probably going to get 5k in, so if it is positive equity, it's not much, and you can find just as good or a better spot later for these chips, so I don't mind a fold. Nice. An interesting play with 3-4 right there. Hits his trade. You could argue this should be 2.6, like a 7 raise of 750 to 800. But it's, again, early on in the tournament, I'm kind of lazy. Just hit the ×3 and do it a lot. But technically speaking, it wouldn't hurt. This guy only has 2k chips left behind, so I mean, it's not even really a question. It's just put him all in right now, because he's so short that he's doing this with I mean, he's not doing it with air. He's got like a pocket pair or 2 face cards or something, okay. But when he's this short, Jack, you're not even consider getting away from him. And I actually think this is a mistake. Instead of calling here, because he's only got 2k chips left, what are you going to do? Fold? I mean, just put them all in right here. And that doesn't allow him to get away if he gets a really bad flop. So this I would classify as a mistake. It's way better than folding, but you should just put him all in. It's possible I didn't notice his chip count when this happened. Then once an ace comes out, you're in a kind of weak spot, but I mean, with how short he is, I probably would still call, even if he had jams. And then once he checks the flop, it basically tells you he doesn't have an ace. So this is a mistake as well, because if he has a 10 or any straight draw or flush draw, you want to get him in because he'll think he has draw equity, or you may actually have some draw equity. Whereas the river, there is no draw equity. So I wouldn't check here. I'd put him in here. I would have put him in the flop, and then I'd definitely put him in here. So I'm not sure why I was doing this here. It's possible I didn't notice his stack size at the time. And once the king comes out, you're not beating a ton of things anymore. So, although if you check, he's gonna shove if he has a king or an ace, and then you're probably gonna call anyway. So you might as well just have bet here anyway too. So this whole hand was played far more passively than I would agree with in hindsight. So again, I think it's likely I did not notice his stack size. So you be paying attention. You're never going to fold for 300 here. And he did have absolutely nothing. So again, he probably would have called the other 2K chips pre-flop because he was already committed. So we left 2,000 chips out there by not making a raise pre-flop. So I would classify that as a error. Same guy. A full 3 times might have a little more fold equity than you want here. You kind of want him to shove all in. He's going to do it really light. So I'd say you should bet like 650, something small that hopefully he'll be like, oh, he's messing around with me, and then just jam over top of you. Whereas 900, I feel like, is kind of maximizing your percentage of the time you get this guy to fold, where you don't really want that here. So I would make this raise 650 or 750 here. He folds anyway. You can make an argument to call this or min raise it. The fold's not completely terrible either. So. It's like I raise this, you fold 2-2. This is kind of a small raise. I mean, so unless you have like a pocket pair or something, even then you probably should be betting like 880. So I kind of disagree with this min raise in hindsight. Again, hindsight's 2020. The table's popping up, so you just click things or do whatever's easiest. You're being lazy. So ideally, I would not just hit the ×2 button. I would type in 1050, bet like 1050 or 950 would be the ideal bet here. And then snap call this. I mean, it's just not even a question. He's got less than 1 buy-in. The blinds are pretty steep. He's doing this with aces. I mean, just call this. I'm not even really going to think about this much. Assuming no whammy folds, which he does. Yeah, it's an instant call for me. He does ace now. Moves us up to 36k chips. We're still a chip leader at the table. The game is getting pretty deep. We're down to 6-handed. Whenever you're down to 6-handed, it means you only have a few tables left. Like 3 or 4. If you had more than that, the tables don't really get under 7 players. So I'd say there's probably about 27 players left in this tournament. From an original 250 entry. This call I agree with. You both have extremely deep stacks. He's got 30,000 chips left, so I mean, you only have to hit a 6. Once you hit 1 in 7 times, but to make this a profitable call, you'd only have to hit it like once in 15 times or something. You're way ahead of that. So this is definitely a call. I would not raise it. You don't want to be building pot. You just want to get your set mining equity. If you hit a 6, you continue on. If you mix your 6, you get away. It's nice and clean. And that's one good thing about set mining, is it's not ambiguous. Whereas when you hit a draw, it can be kind of ambiguous of what to do and if you should continue or not. Set mining is rather clean. You either hit the 6 and you continue, or you miss the 6 and you get away. So it avoids a lot of those ugly situations where you're sitting on a draw and have a tough choice to make. So definitely call this for set value, and I would not raise it because it's not strong enough to raise. Once you miss the flop, again, usually just check fold. That's what I do. Even if you hit the 7, you have the weak side of the draw. It's just, or the weak side of the straight. It's just not worth continuing here. This guy jammed all in. A7 probably is just not strong enough to cover his range, or to be ahead of half of his range. So this should be a fold. Yeah, this is questionable. It's not bad. I don't know if it's great either. Let's say you could be fine folding this. If you are going to raise it, raise it to 1050 or 950. So if you get 3-bet, you could get away from it for cheaper. Not awful, but not great either. They do awful. So it would be a fold. So it would be a fold. And so I moved, which means this table broke down, probably to 2 tables now, I would presume. There are 18 people left in the tournament. Sorry, that's what I do. 6-5 would be a fold, 8-2 would be a fold, 8-10 would be a fold, 3 jacks a fold, 10 jacks a fold. Folds, jack fold, king 6 fold, 6-5 fold, fold, fold. Big line. I would probably fold this. I mean, you just these guys. If these guys were at 30k stacks, you have a lot more implied odds for when you do hit something miraculous to get paid. But they're just not deep enough in stack size to make it worth. So I think this should have just been folded. It's not terrible to float and see the pot 3-way. I mean, it's 700 more to call for a pot over 4K. It's just not great either. I'd probably lean towards folding that. Good folds, folds, folds. Again, a 2.6 raise is probably better. Yeah, just fold 7s here. I mean, when this guy shoves, I mean, he does it pretty wide. That's how steep the blinds are at this point, but 7s is not ahead of half of what he'd do that with. Really, you want to be ahead of like 60% of what he would do that with, and 7s does not cut the mark there. Approaching halfway through this tournament, I'll try to speed things up here. We may break it into a second video for final table. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'd probably just fold this. I mean, it's tough to call for set equity. They do it 20 times, so it's borderline, but then if you get 3-bet, you have to fold it. So it's not great to call this for set equity. It's not terrible either. You can't 3-bet it. 9-9 is definitely not strong enough to 3-bet it. So all your options are kind of bleak. If you can squeeze equity out of it, it's minimal, and you could probably find a better spot. So you could argue call it for 1400, but I wouldn't be opposed to just folding this anyway from right here either, and that's what I did. It looks odd. I mean, it looks like you should almost play it, but a card higher than a 9 is going to come on the flop most of the time. 10, Jack, Queen, King, Ace. So you're really only playing it for set value. and when it comes to set value, stacks are only 20 times that amount. So it's just borderline. It's just not a great play no matter what you do with it. So folding it is fine. Just waiting for a better spot. Again, as usual, a card higher than a 9 does pop out. Table broke again, or shuffled again. They've just been moved over to the other table if there is 2 left. These are all folds pretty much. Lost a bunch of chips there, so let's see what happens. Lost about 10k chips. So we're with ace 9. I do agree, you should probably play this. Both these players are pretty tight. This guy plays 19% of his hands, 16%. So usually you get them both to fold, and you do have the better position post flop. So I would make a raise here. I would make it 2.6, so like 1850. And I just did the standard 3x. Again, early on the tournament, I'm kind of like, but at this stage, you should be typing it in. Really. That's my idea. Yeah, I did it over jam. I think you should fold here. I don't think the call I made was correct, because this guy's fairly tight. You're asking to put in another 9k chips. Again, hindsight's always 20/20 when you're on the spot here. Things go quicker, but I think at this point, especially since you did a full 3 times and showed a bunch of strength, you might want to fold here. It's not terrible the call, because he does just think you're abusing his blind a lot from the button, and then just shoves weak, like almost any ace. So it's not terrible the call, but if I would lean one way or the other now, I would probably say this should have been folded. You had 8-8, so it was a coin flip. If you had 2 cards above a pocket pair, it's about 50-50, pretty close. So this was a coin flip, and I came out on the negative side of it. King next hand though. It's a little bit aggressive. I mean, I just lost a big hand, so I know why I did this. When you lose a big hand and then just jam the next one, a lot of times it looks tilty. Tilt is when you're playing poorly due to like just losing a large hand, for example. So that's what I was hoping it would look tilty by shoving here. But technically, the more correct play, because you want people to kind of do a raise to like 4,500, 4,700. And it did scare everyone off, so, and again, that's kind of why 4,700 would be better, because shoving all in maximizes your fold equity. You have the chances that they both fold at the highest point by you shoving all in. Whereas if you bet 4,700, there's a very strong chance one of them is going to continue on, and you'll continue to get paid. You do have to raise it. You can't call it, because with kings, especially because when ace comes out, you're in a bad spot. But I would say a raise of 4,700 instead of this all-in jam would have been preferred. And again, I know why I did it, because the last hand I just lost 10k chips, so I was hoping it looked like a tilt shove, and I'd get called light, but it didn't work out that way. Fourth ace and 171 hands. So he raises, you get a 3-bet from this guy. A 4-bet would scream that I have aces or kings. So I do agree with this flat. You do want to be careful. You don't really want to go to 3-way pot with aces. You got prefer a 2-way pot. But I do agree, because if I had raised 4-bet this, we're going to get select to folds far more often. Whereas I want him calling things like ace-jack, ace-king, jack-jack. So I kind of want him to stick around and play the pot a little bit. But yeah, so yeah, I would not 4-bet this. I think flat is adequate. He does call. He does stick around. It's a pretty good flop. I don't suspect 2-2 or 3-3. because he would have folded 2-2 or 3-3 to that 3-bet, and he would have not 3-bet 2-2 or 3-3. So the only thing that beats me is queen-queen. That's it, nothing else. But king-queen might be there. Ace-queen is still a possibility. Jacks is a possibility. Kings is a possibility. So you definitely do want to bet and protect your hand and start to continue building the pot. So I checked. I don't know about this check. I think this should. I get it. I'm fully slow playing and slow boating this, hoping one of them will bet. But I think you might want to bet here. Do you get both of them to fold a lot if you bet? Yeah, but it protects your hand. If they have jack comes on the turn, you're going to be kicking yourself. So in hindsight, I don't think it's terrible, this flop check, but I think the preferred thing to do would be to bet this here. And it doesn't matter because we get someone just jamming for, it's not over jamming a pot, it's 15k into 17k, but it is a strong jam. If he had nuts like queen-queen, he wouldn't do this. If he had queen-queen, he would not jam here because he'd be wanting to get paid. He would bet a small amount. So this tells me he does not have queen-queen. And again, we've already ruled out 2-2 and 3-3, so we know we're good here. So we're definitely going to call. I would just call it. Jamming all in might make Select fold another 1 or 2% of the time. It's rarely going to matter, but technically calling it for 15.7 might get Select to play along another 1 or 2% of the time. So it is preferred over jamming all in. And Select does fold. And he had ace king. It's an extreme overplay with ace king. It's just bad. This was just bad play. This is about $100 equity pot, so he really just handed me about 25 bucks equity there. It's just extremely overplayed with ace king. He shouldn't have 3-bet it pre-flop. He should have called it, and then the flop he should have been check folding really, or check calling if he really wanted to see a turn. But the way he played it was way over aggressive and just cannot be justified. It was bad play by Chips Digby. Chips Digby, his name. Puts us in a pretty strong position. We're up to 51k chips. We're the chip leader at the table, so we are protected. Like no matter who we get all in against, they can't bust us out here, which gives you a layer of protection for staying alive in the tournament. It's pretty strong to have. At this point, this guy's shoving his 1,800 chips already out there. He's shoving 8k. I'm going to call this. Not even really a question. He's doing it probably as low as like ace 9 or better, or almost any pocket pair. So I fully agree with the call here. I would not raise it. Because you raise it, and if this guy wakes up with king or ace ace, you can't get away from it. So the call is adequate, and then if this guy shoves all in, you got to tank for quite some time, but probably end up folding. Hit the queen right off the bat, and he had ace king, so it's fortunate. That's poker. Ace jack. Might not have called it. So this was pretty on the line of what I would call. The reason being ace jack is probably not ahead of half of what he would do this with. You have to be ahead of at least half of what they do it with. A few chips there to see how it went. Unopposed to this call, you have a pretty large stack. The blinds are kind of high. It's been folded around to you. He has a random hand because he hasn't acted yet. It's just in the big blind. So your 10 king's probably ahead of a random hand, or definitely is ahead of a random hand. The 3 times is pretty strong. I'm not really opposed to this. It's not bad. Do get a call. Now with this flop, you flopped an open-ended straight draw. We have a little equity if you hit a king, hit an ace or 9, completes the straight. But then in addition to that equity, you probably want to add your fold equity to it. So this is one of those positions where you have a green light to make a stab. This would be a semi-bluff because you're bluffing on a draw, not a outright bluff. But I would make the semi-bluff because your equity of hitting a 9 or ace, or the small equity of hitting a king if that is ahead, it's good, but it's not great. But when you add the equity up when you bet and he folds to that equity, that's what tips it over to probably a profitable move. So I do anticipate, I bet here it's possible, you can argue just to check and play it safe as well. Especially if you bet and then he calls or raises, you could probably assume he has the jack or queen. So let's see what I did. I did check, and he checks behind. So when he checks behind, he basically tells us he doesn't have the jack or queen. If he had the jack or queen, he would have bet there. So I mean, he could have a low pocket pair, he could have ace 10, ace 9, but I do not anticipate him having a jack or queen at this point. I check again. The reason is I checked on the flop, so if I bet here, what am I trying to represent? The 7? I mean, it's unlikely at 7 if I raise his blind. So it's really just not a good card to bluff on this turn. At the same time, I don't think he has anything either, so even though it is a weak bluff card, it probably wouldn't have been terrible to make a stab here as well. And checks behind. And the river does not help anyone. I finally do make a stab at it. I reason that I don't think he's got the jack or queen, and therefore I am likely okay to make the stab here, and he will fold. But again, the 6 is not a great card to bluff at. It's not terrible either. Because have things like 8, 9. We're in my range on the so I do agree with the stab here. He does fold. Folds, 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 fold, 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 fold. Kings. He min raises under the gun. Yeah, that's a common thing you see, a min raise under the gun. You definitely can't call. You don't want him to see a free flop. If ace comes, you're going to be in a bad spot. And then even if he has a smaller pocket pair than you, he always has a chance to hit the set. So you need to make him pay for those chances he has to catch up on you or to beat you. And you need to make it enough of a bet where it's improper for him, where the amount of money he has to call is not worth the odds of him hitting, like if he has 6-6, hitting a 6, where it's a bad play for him. You have to make it a bad decision for him, technically, from a proper standpoint, to protect your hand. So you definitely have to raise this. 5K, I think this is fine. You could go 5,400 as well. And we're both huge stacks here. I mean, he's got 85K and that 50K. So you also want to start building the pot here. I mean, this is a fairly wet flop. There's a lot of draw possibilities, straight and flush, as well as the queen is very well in tune with his range. King, queen, jack, queen, ace, queen, things like that. So I do expect he hit a piece of this flop, and then he checks it. And then if he had a draw, check is normal too. So I definitely anticipate I'm betting this, building the pot because we have huge stacks. I would bet at least half pot, if not 2/3. Probably 2/3 I'd advocate for. Let's see what I did. I bet half pot. Half pot would be minimum. I do get a call. As I said, he did likely hit some piece of this flop. It'd be almost hard not to with that kind of flop. And then one of the worst cards in the deck pops out, the ace. So at this point, you have to ask what's still in his range. I mean, he min-bet pre-flop. Min-bets under the gun quite often are small pocket pairs or suited connectors because you don't want to inflate the pot, but you want to see a flop. So the ace isn't extremely worrisome. It is worrisome because ace jack is still in his range, ace 10, things like that. You can't fully rule out. So you do want to exercise some pot control at this point and make sure you're not going to bust out early. So he checks. So with that in mind, I would probably check as well here, because if you bet, will he call you with a straight draw or flush draw? Yes. He might already be ahead of you with the ace. Whereas if you check here, you guarantee the pot's not going to be big enough to be getting all in on the river. So you guarantee that you have a layer of protection. It's an interesting hand though. You can make an argument to make a bet here, but then if you 3-bet you're screwed. I think a check's fine at this point for pot control reasons. And that's a terrible card for me as well because it completes any spade flush. It completes some straight draw possibilities. It's just not a good card. But he does check. If he had, again, there's no draw equity on the river. If he had made his hand, he'd be betting here 100% of the time. If he had a great hand, a straight or a flush, he would be betting here. So I could presume he does not have that. So the question becomes, if I bet, will he call with a worse hand? So if I bet, will he call with a queen or 10? I think the chances are he might. So I would advocate a small bet here. But it does open up the possibility of you getting check raised too. So you have to be aware of that and be slightly concerned. So check almost wouldn't be terrible here either, just to be sure you're not going to get check raised. But I do think he might call with 10 jack, queen king, some things you are ahead of, and therefore I do think there is a little more equity you could squeeze out of this situation here by making a bet. So I did check behind. I was second pair. I can't fault the check behind with second pair. But in hindsight, I do think a bet of like 8k to 12k would have been appropriate here, because there's a strong possibility a 10 or queen would have made the call. And he mucks his hands. We're not going to know what he had, unfortunately. You can definitely advocate a call here, and the reason is because he's so deep stacked. It's 1/32nd of his stack and yours, the effective stack sizes. So you hit your pair 1 in 7 times. So the implied odds are pretty high. You are slightly worried because if you call and someone 3 bets or jams all in, then you have to fold. So I would say a fold is okay here. It's not bad to fold this. I think a call would be okay as well. Neither of them are great. I do take the safer route and just get out of it. This is just there's really no reason to be messing around early position with ace-10 offsuit, so I'm more than fine with fold. Okay, just wait for, even if you can squeeze plus equity out of it, you can find a spot with more plus equity. So ace-7 under the gun, just fold it. It's not worth looking around with. Yeah, this is fine, and I even would say 3x is appropriate here because that puts this guy all in. You could have bet 5, 1, 6, 7 if you really wanted to target this guy. You could bet exactly what he had, but either way, it's fine. I agree with this play, regardless of how he did some jack. You could raise this 5,400, would be more appropriate. It just allows you to get away if things get out of control. If someone shoves all in and then you get a call or something, you're going to be folding ace queen at that point. So it allows you to get away with a little bit less chip spent. It also keeps control of the pot. You don't really want to be building and inflating the pot until you have the nuts in hand. So I would say a bet of 5,400 is more appropriate than 6k. I do hit pretty well. He flat called, he didn't re-raise, so what's still in his range is ace king, of course. Ace queen is as well, unlikely because it's exactly what I have. Ace jack is, but unlikely because both those cards are out there. Ace 10 probably is, ace 9 probably is, 7-7 through 10-10 is, queen queen or king king. I think I would have got a 3-bet pre-flop. So I think I'm ahead of most things he has. The only things that really beat me is ace jack or ace king. But since I'm second to act here, I'm going to get a lot of information by what he does first. So that's why it's really important to be in the better position. As we call it, the poker position is very key. So because I act second plus flop, I'm going to get a good amount of information from what he does here. And he checks. If he had ace king, he has to bet it to protect from the flush draw. If he has ace jack, you could check it in slow play or 6-6, but it's pretty unlikely. So the majority of the time when he checks here, I would take that as a signal that he had 7-7 through 10-10, or like ace-8 and doesn't really know where he's at. So I would take it as a signal that you are ahead in general. And if you bet and you get check raised, then I take that as a signal that he had ace jack or 6-6. So in that sense, it's almost clean as well to go ahead and bet here, bet half pot, which I do agree with. You can't let him see free cards at this point. And just as I said, if you get check raised, I would put him on ace jack or 6-6 at this point specifically. Ace king is a possibility. It really sucks. I remember this hand. I remember I tanked my whole time bank for like a minute thinking about this. It was really close. But the fact that he check raised it, check raise is very strong. I think I folded it, so I didn't see what he has, but I believe it's extremely likely he had ace jack or 6-6 at this point. Just that check raise is extremely strong. I'm still sitting okay. Even if I lose this, I only lost 10k chips if I fold this right now. If I call and lose this, I lose another 45k chips. So because he sent up a red flag that I might be bad here, that he might have ace jack or 6-6, I really don't want to get my money in here. And I made the decision that even if I was ahead of him, I thought a little bit, that I could wait and find a better spot where I know for sure. So I still have a good chunk of chips, and I just was not willing to risk it here. And I did think about this quite some time. This was very close, but in the end I did fold this, and I do think it is a proper laydown. I think his check raise checks. I bet he jams. I think the check raise is extremely strong. I think this is an extremely strong play because if he had ace king, he has to protect it from that flush draw and straight draw possibilities. If he has, ace queen even, same as me, he would also have to bet and protect it. The only thing that's proper to check raise here is something extremely strong like ace jack or 6-6. 6 jack, he would have folded pre-flop. Ace ace, he would have 3-bet me pre-flop. So I think it has to be ace jack or 6-6. And it just wasn't worth it. So I think getting away was the correct call. So prompted. And he mucks, so we don't know. But I do think this is one of those plays that likely was conducive to me winning this tournament. This laydown here, this fold I made. I think this was an extremely good fold, looking at it again. And it was tough though. I would pay $20 to this player for him to show me what he had. And Poker Host has player-to-player transfer ability, so I could have actually offered him that. Yeah, sites cracked down on player-to-player transfers a while ago, and some sites are just now re-enabling them. It did hurt though. It did take a third of our stack down, so it did make a dent, but I was just not willing to put the tournament life on the line on that hand there. I don't like calling with top pair, top kicker. Top pair, top kicker, or a good kicker it's a good hand to bet and get value from, but when it comes to calling with it, I prefer that 2-pair better to be making calls, especially to a check raise. The shove will look odd to most players, but it's correct, and I can show you it's correct. Triple spin go program still works. Hand 218. Hands labeled. Not really labeled. It's Queen 3. Halfway down. Let's see if I just want to take a 1-second version show you another program. If I can find this hand. So my single wizard will still work. And it's asking me for a code, even though I've already purchased this $100 program. So I guess I will have to go retrieve a code and get this working again. But this program will there's a certain situation in tournament poker where the decision becomes pretty mathematical instead of psychological. And this is that situation. And it's only when the blinds are rather high and the pot has been unopened and this guy's in the big blind, so you know he has a completely random hand because he hasn't acted yet. So because he has a completely random hand, and because there is 4,600 chips out here, it's a math problem where the only variable is what percentage of hands will he call with. So if you can make an estimate of what percent of hands he will call with here, then you could complete the math problem. Well, Sit and Go Wizard actually will complete the math problem. I would not, but Sit and Go Wizard will do that math out for you and tell you which cards are correct to shove on this guy and which are not. And if I could bring up Sit and Go Wizard, I could show you that math, but this would be a correct shove. And the reason is because you pick 4,600 chips up when he folds. He only has 3 times 4,600 chips. So you only need him to fold 2/3 of the time, if that. And I don't think he's calling at 33% here. And then even when he does call, you do have equity of hit a queen or 3. So this is a proper shove, despite it looking odd. It's close to an any 2 card shove. I would say it's not an any 2 card shove, but with queen high, when he has a completely random hand, it's a proper shove. And he does call. Well, we're about to find out what he had. He has king 6. It's a kind of a weak call. It takes a stronger hand to call with than it does to shove with, because when you shove, you have fold equity. When you call, you have 0 fold equity. So was my shove better? I think my shove was 100% correct, and I think Sit and Go Wizard would verify that, despite it looking odd, because it's just the way the math works out. His call, I think, is actually a slightly weaker call. It's definitely not terrible, especially if he recognized that I was good and that I would be shoving almost any 2 cards there. If he recognized that, then this is definitely not a terrible call. If he didn't recognize that, this is probably a pretty bad call. But either way, I have 2 queens held, and we'll continue on. It's poker. His king 6 was roughly 63%. I was roughly around a 30-something percent, 33 or 34, and a few percent to tie. Definitely get away from 7-7. You have a all-in and a isolation all-in. This is called an isolation all-in because he's jamming all-in over the all-in and trying to isolate just this player and get everyone else to fold. So that's an isolation release, and I will let him do that because 7-7 is not ahead here. Fold, fold, fold. Made a bunch of chips on this one, so let's see what happened. Yeah, I would just check this. There's no reason to mess around with this guy. You're in the big line, see a free flop. Just see a free flop. If you hit, continue on. If you miss, just get away from it. It's simple as that. And I do kind of hit with the draw. At this point, it's a really dry flop. He doesn't have a 3 when he limps. He might have limped with 3-3, but not 3-4 or 3-7. So he doesn't have a 3. 10-10, he would have raised to 10-10, not called it. So he could have like 10-jack or something like that, but he doesn't have 10-10. So at most, I would say he's got a 10. More likely, he's got nothing or a pocket pair between 3 and 10. So in light of that, you can, because you have equity to hit a king, equity to hit a heart, and then if you bet, you have equity if he folds. In light of that, I don't think betting here would be bad. I think you're okay to bet here, because then when you do hit your heart, you've been building the pot, and already you can make a bunch on it. So I think a bet is proper here, like half pot, probably half pot bet, and that's exactly what I did. He calls, and no messing around, they just hit the flush right away. Now they hit the flush. Now that he called that, I'd say the most likely things he could have is a 10 jack, 10 queen, 10 9, things of that nature, 8 8, 9 9, he might float the flop, things like that. I do have to bet, especially because if he has any heart, I need to get equity from that draw he has, whereas I wait to the river, he already knows what he's going to do. So you definitely want to bet this. 2/3 pot is appropriate, especially because you want to build the pot to a point where you could shove all in on him on the river, which it does need roughly around that to accomplish that. And he instantly raises me. I mean, at this point, you don't really know where you're at. I mean, what can he have that he's doing this with? I mean, there's really not much. I mean, he didn't have 10-10. He would have raised pre-flop. He doesn't have 3-3. He doesn't have a 3 at all, because he wouldn't have limped pre-flop. He could have 2 other hearts. If he does, it's unlikely he has the ace, so you're still good. 2-2 would be pretty unlikely that he would float the flop. It is possible. But really, his line just, for the most part, this line doesn't make sense. Whatever he's doing here, for the most part, it doesn't make sense. The only thing that would really make sense is 2 hearts, like 8-9 of hearts, would kind of make sense, and 2-2 kind of makes sense. Other than that, it's a bad play. So I think the chances it's a bad play is higher than him having 2-2 or something like 8-9 of hearts. 8-9 of hearts, I beat him anyway. So really only ace something of hearts, which is so unlikely that if he beats me with an ace flush, my king flush, so be it. I'll just call cooler. I'm not going to worry about that. Really 2-2 is the only thing. And I think the chances that he's just making a bad play is higher than him having 2-2. So I would re-raise at this point and just try to get him all in. Because if you call and wait to the river, there's a very good chance he'll fold. This 15k is left. Whereas if you raise him now, he's so pot committed, like 99% of the time, unless he has complete air and is bluffing me, he's got to call. The only way he could fold if I raise him right now is if he has nothing. So I do put him all in, which I do think is correct. So far I think I've played this hand pretty correctly. And unless he has air, he has to, and he does fold. So he had to have air. There's really nothing else that would make sense here other than having complete air. So really that's what I think he had. I think he had like ace queen, ace king, and just tried to make a move, and was not going to happen to my king 5 hearts. So I believe that's what happened. I believe he had ace queen or ace king. We can't see what he had, but if I had to guess, I would bet from ace queen or ace king. And I can't tell in this replay how quickly he folded, but if he folded very quickly, I would presume he wouldn't have had the heart. If he thought it out well and then folded, I would presume he had the ace queen or ace king with a heart. But again, this replay does not show timing tells, as they're called. Timing tells are important. It puts me up to a fairly sizable stack. We're pretty deep in this. I think this is the last 2 tables left. 7 on this. It's probably 7 or 8 on the other table. There's probably 15 people left in this tournament. Like 260. These 8s. He min raises under the gun is first act after the big blind. You definitely have odds to call, at least call. So at minimum I would call. And I probably wouldn't raise because there's no reason. If a card's higher than an 8's going to come out, really you just want to play this for set equity. So in that late, you call it. If you hit an 8, you get away. If you miss your 8, you get away. And it's clean, and you don't get yourself into a bad situation. So I would call this, and just for the chance to hit an 8. And if you don't hit your 8, you're pretty much getting away from it. And I do hit the 8, so this was my 3rd or 4th call with a pocket pair. You hit a pocket pair a set 1 in 7 times. So on the 3rd or 4th attempt we did hit, so I guess by the 4th attempt you would see it more than 50% of the time that you would hit. So that's great news. So how you play it from here matters a lot. We both have really deep stacks, and the pot's only 12k, so we can squeeze as much value out of this as we possibly can. Just had $20 game. I have, sorry, I have $20 game with 6 stacks on it, so it's about 120 in equity. I folded 9-9 here. After this guy played it and then this guy played it, I just thought about it a second, but as you can see, it's a good thing I got out. Kings and jacks in, so it was a good 9-9 fold. Again, this is a $22 game I'm playing while narrating this video. So back to this, you want to get value here. You are second act, which is preferred, so we'll see what he does first. So how we act depends a lot on what he does here. So again, he min raised pre-flop, and then he bets this half pot. So at this point, it's a semi-wet flop. It's good flush equity here, good straight equity here. So you want to be careful. You don't want him to hit flush on you. You don't want him to hit a straight on you. So you can make an argument to raise here. Scaring him off early, though, costs you a lot. So if you are going to take a risk of scaring him off, it's usually better on the turn or river. So you have to balance those two concerns. I'm not sure whether I flatted here or raised and slow played it. I think you can make an argument for either. I think either would be okay. So I did slow play it. Slow playing is higher risk, higher reward. Raising it here is lower risk, lower reward. So really, it's just a balancing act, and you have to make the decision. If this card was a diamond, this would be raised for sure. Although if I had the club and this was the diamond, I would definitely raise this. If this 6 was like the 9 of diamonds, I'd probably raise it because it's even more chance for a straight. But as it is, I think a call or a raise is okay. A call is fine, just slow play it and hopefully let him put the money in on you. So at this point, he's betting half pot again. Your draw equity, if he's going to call you want to draw, it has to be here. Because again, on the river, there's no draw equity because all the cards are known. So at this point, now that you've played the flop and just called and slow played the flop, I would switch from slow playing to a raise. So at this point, I would raise it. I don't remember what I did. If you wanted to call and slow play, it's not the worst decision, but I think you should min raise back like 24k or something here. Does that give a chance that he's going to get away from it if he's trying to be bluffy and really has nothing? Yes, but it protects your hand. So I would probably advocate for a raise to 24k here. Let's see what I did. But again, a call probably isn't. I did just call. It's risky because if a diamond comes and he hits a flush and knocks me out here, you're going to be kicking yourself. Or if a straight comes and he beats you with straight, you're going to be kicking yourself. So please be careful. That's a good card. It does not complete any straights at all. It does not complete any flushes at all. So the only thing that can beat me now is Jack-Jack or King-King. I do not think that is likely at all. I mean, he did check the flop. If he had Jack-Jack, it would have been a good chance he would check the flop. And if he had Jack-Jack or King-King pre-flop, a min raise under the gun is sometimes appropriate. So, I mean, it's a chance, but statistically, the chance of him having Jack-Jack or King-King is pretty damn unlikely. So I think I'm going to make the call that you are good to get almost as much money in as you can here. Well, when it comes to this, I mean, you can make an argument just to flat call this and save the last 34. You could also make an argument to shove all in. Probably, if I had to pick one, you're better off shoving all in here because I think it's rare enough that he has Jack-Jack and King-King. You're fine to do that. So, and I did. So yeah, is what I think you should do. If calling is okay, but I think it's a weaker play, then just having the money in here. Because if he does have Jack-Jack or King-King, so be it. You just got set over setted. Like, you know, it would have been difficult to get away from the set over set. But for all the times he doesn't, where you gain extra value from doing this, this is probably a preferred play. Let's get it in here. He does fold. So So interesting hand. I don't know if we had raised the flop, it's possible he would have folded and we wouldn't have made anywhere near this. It's possible he would have called it and we would have been able to get its last 55k. So again, it's kind of a balancing act, but you do have to be careful, especially calling or floating cards when there's straight and flush possibilities out there. Table moved, where I got moved to the table, move 2. These are all folds. Maybe a few chips in this one. When you're pretty deep, yeah, you can make some stabs at the blinds. You know, if I was gonna make a stab at the blinds, I'd say 5,200 is appropriate here. I did it just at the min raise, straight up. And it's sufficient. Guy in the big blind plays quite a few hands, so I'm kind of surprised he folded to a min raise. This is fine. You could do a 2.6 to min raise. You could fold it just because you're under the gun. It's not the strongest hand under the gun. It's one of those where sometimes you have multiple decisions that are about the same, folding or playing it. Generally, when you have that case, you want to get away from it. Here, calling it was not an option. It's either you have to raise it or fold it. I think 5,400 raise would be more appropriate. Yeah, he's shoving 9k in. The blind swing 100, just call this. He's doing this so wide that this is definitely worth the call. When you are all in, and this guy has 0 chips left, let's back this up. There's no reason for him to bluff the pot, because if he bluffs and I fold, Bronx can still easily win the pot. He's made nothing, so he's risking those bluff chips for nothing. And I can't bluff it because if I get this guy to fold, well, my ace jack could still easily lose to Bronx. So in this situation, when you have one guy all in and then 2 players still in, what normally happens is you play very face up. Me and Pastor would be both playing very face up here. If we check, we don't have anything. If we bet, we have a pair. You don't bluff in this situation because there's nothing to gain from bluffing. So we're both checking. We're both telling each other we have nothing. And then I hit the jack on the river, so I presume I will bet because he will sometimes call an 8 or 9 at this point. Or 9 would beat me, so I guess it's only 8 I'd get value out of, but I wouldn't mind the bet here. Check's not bad either, because I mean the only thing you get value out of is that 8, but probably make a stab there. If he had something, he probably wouldn't have tried to check. So this hand was busted 7th place on this. Hands. King 10, and King 10. Yeah, I agree with this. I mean, there's 5,000 chips in the pot. I really want to take initiative here and use my fold equity. So I just happened to have run into King King. It was unlucky. But I agree with the shove here. The hand that really did this was that Laws that sent me out of this tournament. It's a split. Was this hand a few hands ago that was off screen? The coin flip 50%, so this was really the hand that set me up for that. I'm going to shove King 10 there. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the way I played that. 3 times is fine, call is fine. And 10-10 just folds this time. And then that set up the 10 king shove. So take a 7th place finish there for $72. I think I bought in twice. So yeah. First just plays 450 would be nice. Back to this. So yeah, I think you can make a small bet here instead of checking. Queen's fold, ace 3 fold, 5 queen fold, king 4 fold, 4 queen fold, ace king you gotta play. Snap call, it's not even a question. Once this guy shoves in, instant call. I had his king covered. It's called having a hand dominated because he can't hit the king anymore because I would still win and hit the king. It's the only thing he has left to hit the jack. So it's strongly ahead of him in this matchup here. I mean, this is obviously just really a blind steal attempt. There's some hidden set value behind the blind steal attempt, but if you're gonna go for a blind steal attempt, this should be like a 7,700 raise, not a 9K raise, to save yourself some chips when you get jammed over top of. Again, this should probably be like 7,600, about 7,600. Save yourself 1,400 chips. If someone did jam over and you had a fold. You just don't have odds really to call this. You these 50K chips left, 30K. Yeah, I mean, you can fold this or you can call it. It doesn't have a lot of chips, so I'm kind of leaning towards folding it. It's not strong enough to raise. Yeah, that's fine. This is probably fine too. I mean, he's barely min raising. It's like 2.01 times raising. So he's been raising the blind a lot every time he raises on our blinds. So at some point you have to start floating with the cards like Jack, Queen, King to send him a signal that you can't just get away with it. But when you completely whiff, I mean, and you're out of position, it's not worth fighting him. I'm not fighting this guy in this pot. I'm fighting still the whole tournament to stay alive and increase your stack. So there's never any vendetta versus you and one other guy, really, until your head's up. This raise is fine. It's from the cutoff, 3 times raise. Again, you could make it like 8,800. So you call on the button. This guy's playing 24% of his hands. Of those 24% he plays, he raises 15% of them. His 3-bet percentage is pretty low. So if you had a good hand, you probably would not be 3-betting it here unless he has ace, ace, or king, king. His aggression factor's pretty solid. So I do expect him to be an okay player, pretty good player. So I raise the full 3 times pre-flop. This flop misses most of what Selick has. I have a gut shot if I hit a 6. I have backdoor equity on the if you hit the river, 2 spades, or if you hit an ace, you have some equity. So this is probably an okay spot to continuation bet. Let's call it continuation bet. And I do go ahead and continuation bet. I do it strongly, which I agree with, because there's straight and flush possibilities here. If you want to check fold at this point too, you can as well. Check fold is not a bad route to go here. If you're going to get bluffy like this, you really have to know what you're doing and why. So I put select here on, you know, ace king, ace queen, ace jack, king queen, things of that nature. I think if he had ace ace or king king, he would have 3-bet me pre-flop. Jack jack and queen queen are still, it's still there in 10-10, still there. I think he would have at least thought about raising me pre-flop more, although I guess with this replayer you can't see timing tells, so I don't remember if you did. But most of the time I think he's got ace king, ace queen, ace jack, and he's whiffed this flop. Whereas I still have the initiative. I raised and he called me, so he was the one keeping control. I was being aggressive. So now I have the opportunity to continuation bet and stay on that aggressiveness and continue to represent a 10-10, jack jack, queen queen, ace ace. I continue to represent a really strong hand. And then even if that fails, you have some equity to hit the 6, or some other crazy things. So you do still have 2 other cards. So this is definitely not a bad spot for this continuation bet here. And he flats it. Once he flats it, you could have king queen spades, ace jack spades. You could have 9-9. You could have 6-6. A lot of things. So if you had queen queen or jack jack, you might re-raise here. So it's slightly worrisome, but I think most of the time he's got like ace queen of spades, or ace queen with 1 spade even. You would still sometimes call this, or 6-6 or 9-9. 9-9 would be pretty unlikely because I have a 9, so 6-6 would be more likely. 10-10, jack jack, queen queen are still there. There's a good chance I would have got a 3-bet from some of those hands pre-flop though. So 6-6, 10-10. King queen spades, ace queen with ace of spades, something like that. That's really what I put him on at this point. This helps me because if I hit a 10 on the river, I now have the high straight. If I hit a 6, so it changes the gut shot straight draw to an open ender. So I still do have a good amount of draw equity. If he was on some of those hands like ace queen with 1 spade, he knows he's not going to hit the flush now. He's got to get away from it. If he was on 10-10, now he's going to be scared of the jack. I've been betting every opportunity I have, so this is not a bad spot to double barrel. Again, you have to be very careful whenever you double or even single barrel bluff or double barrel, or especially triple barrel, because I think I remember this hand. I think I do triple barrel. You have to be really kind of in tune with his range and what you think is in his range and how what you have compares to it and how he's going to react. So his range I'm defining as 6-6, 9-9 I'll take out because I have a 9, it's unlikely. So 6-6, 10-10. Both of those, if I double barrel here, he can't continue, he's got to give it up really. 6-6 maybe because of the straight draw, but if I bet hard, he's still kind of got to give it up. So if I bet hard here, it takes 6-6 and 10-10 out. So if he had ace queen with the ace of spades, he's got to fold it. If he has queen king of spades, he probably will continue. There's not much. If he had ace jack with the ace of spades, he might continue. So ace jack I'm worried about. King queen of spades I'm not that worried about, because if you triple barrel on the river, you'd fold. But you really want to avoid these because you're risking busting out these kind of moves here. So I guess let's just see what happens. So I do make the double barrel a full half pot. Again, I raise pre-flop, I bet on the flop, I'm betting on the turn. So I'm showing a really strong hand. He can't rule out queen queen, king king, ace ace from my range, because I've never checked or called. I've only bet or raised. And then even if this double barrel fails, if you hit a 6 or a 10, you're still in okay shape. So this is a delicate hand. This is a very interesting hand. And he does call, and you don't want to see a call. You definitely want him to fold at this point. But if he had king queen of spades, he'd be calling. If he had ace jack with ace of spades, he'd call. If he had ace queen of spades, he'd call. King queen's more likely because of an ace. If he had 9-9 or 10-10, most likely he folds at this point. If he had 6-6, he might call, but it would be a bad call. So there's some things that he'd call here with, but the only thing really he would continue all the way to the showdown is ace jack if the latch card is a scratch, and that's about it, unless he hits another spade and he hits a flush. So really the main concern I have right now is ace jack with the ace of spades. And I think that's kind of unlikely because I think he would have folded that on the flop. If he had ace jack, and I bet most of the time, I think he's a decent player, most of the time I think he's going to fold, even with the ace of spades, unless he had two spades. So I don't know what he's on right now, but I would say it's likely a draw. King, queen, spades makes sense. 6-6 would make sense. That's what makes the most sense, is king, queen of spades, or 6-6 at this point. 9-9 or 10-10 I think he gives up here. So I would say the most two likely hands he has is 6-6 or king, queen of spades. Go to the river, see what happens. Oops. And the river is a scratch card, so if he had king, queen of spades, he no longer hits. If he had 6-6, he no longer hits. The only thing he might call with is ace jack. However, I bet pre-flop, I bet the flop, I bet the turn. I've been representing queen, queen, king, king, ace, ace really strongly. I haven't been going crazy in this tournament. So even if he has ace jack, he would still have to tank for quite some time and think about it. So you might even be able to get him off ace jack. So I do not recommend ever triple barrel bluffing, because 9 times out of 10 you go wrong with them and will harm yourself more than you'll help. However, this is a prime time for it. If you're ever going to do it, I have a pretty good feeling of what he has. I think he has ace jack, king queen, or 6-6. King queen is definitely, spades, he's definitely folding here. 6-6, he's definitely folding here. Ace jack, I might get a call, and that concerns me, but I also think there's a solid chance he'll fold it if I triple barrel here, because he thinks I might have queen, queen, ace, king, king, or ace, ace. As well as I think ace jack's a little bit unlikely, because I don't think he would have made the flop call. So I think 6-6 or king, queen, spades was the most likely outcome, and if that's the case, I do need to get him off 6-6, because 6-6 would beat me. So a triple barrel. And I did triple barrel. I mean, these are the pivotal hands in the poker tournament right here. And again, if you're ever going to do this, you really need to know what you're doing and why you're doing it, and what his range is, and how he's going to react. And he did fold. So triple barrel succeeded here. I do expect he had 6-6 or king, queen of spades. I would also pay this guy to tell me what he had and show me what he had. But my guess is 6-6 or king, queen of spades. I mean, or you could always have like 9 queen of spades too, I guess you might have called pre-flop, but either way, I felt pretty good about that he would fold on that triple barrel. The only thing I thought I might not get a fold from is ace jack. And then, but even with the ace jack, I thought it would be a good chance he would fold. So that worked out, set me up pretty well here. This is fine. I get 2 callers. It's a little concerning. Once you miss, probably just check fold. There's no rush here. Don't get crazy with it. Just checks around. I mean, you only have 1 card to come. It's unlikely you're gonna hit a queen or king. Probably just fold it at this point. I mean, if you hit a 6, you're already screwed no matter what. So just probably get away at this point. You're not really invested in this much. Maybe a lot of 8 or 12k chips. Just walk away at that point. This is called. I mean, ace jack, you're 5-handed. So 5-handed ace jack is pretty strong. Once you miss, you probably just check fold. Again, there's no reason to really. King's well within his range, so you definitely don't want to bluff, because it's very highly likely he has the king. And there's just no reason to get into a big pot with this guy right here. So I do anticipate him going to fold. This raise is debatable. I mean, when you're down to 5-handed, you need to be making some steal attempts. So I'm not opposed to it. It is opening the pot. You're in good position. It's not bad. It's not great. He 3-bets very small. This is the same guy that was abusing our blinds earlier, so we already know he's prone to a high 3-bet, and he has a high 3-bet percentage. So I wouldn't put him on just ace, king, queen, queen from this. I would say he's doing this pretty wide. I don't remember. Yeah, I did call. I mean, you probably should just fold. Even though you know he's doing this really wide, you probably should just get away. You're doubling your investment, or a little bit more than doubling your investment here by calling this. And you should just get away here. And then once you whiff the flop, definitely just get away from it. Which is what I do. I call. I mean, part of that call was because it's telling him, I'm not going to let you get away with 3-bets. I'm going to see flops with you, and I'm going to be playing back at you. So part of that call, that 10K there, was sending him a message that he is not green lighted to 3-bet and steal my blinds without getting played back at. So part of it wasn't that one hand was the right decision. Part of it was in the future, it makes it less likely that he's going to be abusing my blinds and 3-betting as well. That's fine, raise. This raise is fine. I mean, this is a really dry flop. You know, I don't expect he has a 3, because he wouldn't have called with whatever pre-flop. I mean, unless he had 3-3, but extremely unlikely. Could he have a jack? Jack can be, you know, planning to check raise me, sure, but that's the only thing he could have hit was a jack. So whereas if I bet, most of the time he has missed this flop, and most of the time when he has missed this flop, if I bet, he folds. So I think this is a good spot to make a stab, especially since you have if you hit an ace or queen, you have top pair again. So you still have draw equity as well. So I would stab at this. Yeah, I would not check here. I would make a bet here. It's possible I was trying to cool down from that ace 9 bluff, even though they never saw that ace 9. But it's possible I was just trying to cool down and play straightforward for a while after that. But I think the flop should have been bet here, I think. I would call this because, I mean, you could hit an ace, king, or a queen. But really, I think you should bet the flop. And it's an ugly spot now at this point. I mean, there's a good chance your ace high is ahead. The 3s are paired and jacks are paired. There's a good chance you hit the 10 too. It's just an ugly spot, and I think it could have been helped to avoid this spot by making that bet on the flop. As it stands now, I'd probably get rid of this. I mean, he's asking you to put 25% of what you have left in on ace high. And ace high could be good, but I mean, any pocket pair is ahead of you, 10's ahead of you. I don't expect him to have a jack or a 3, but a pocket pair or 10 is still pretty likely. I do just fold here with him. Call here is fine. Yeah, I mean, I don't mind floating that flop either. 2 of the cards. Same situation as the last one. Your ace high might be good. It's kind of just weak. And I did call this one. I mean, this is questionable. You might want to just fold this. It might be that I was annoyed at the last one. I wanted to call ace high. This is questionable. It's not terrible. It's not great. Definitely not great. It's middle of the road. When it's middle of the road, generally you're better off just folding. He did have the jack. Let's see, did he tell that he had a jack? Yeah, his raised pre-flop, jack's well within his range. I check and he bets just like he has the jacks, you know, a float. Yeah, so is this check here in the turn that made me think he might not have the jack? I thought if he had the jack, he would bet this turn as well, but he was just exercising pot control. It's a sign he's probably a decent player. And that threw me off there. And then once the jack pairs, I think it's unlikely he has jack, and then he's kind of signaled he didn't, so that's why I made that call. I still kind of disagree with it, though. I think it should be cool. Uh-oh, I froze the thing. Got a second here. There we go. the chips here, see what happened. Again, it's the same guy that was annoying me before, and there's only 4,100 call. It's pretty much just min raise. And again, I'm partially trying to send him the message to stop abusing my big blind, that I will play back at you and not just hand you chips, so that he hopefully does not steal against me or attempt to steal as much in the future. So part of this call is that dynamic at play as well. When your head's up, you hit a pair, usually pretty good. With any 2 random cards, you only hit a pair 1 in 3 times. So I would think my 8s are pretty good here. And since he's being aggressive and like feisty in these pots with me, I chose to check because I already could tell his personality type. He's been trying to abuse my blinds. He 3-bet me a couple times late. And so I already know he's got an aggressive personality type and play style. And therefore when I check this, he knows most of the time I missed a flop, and when I miss a flop I usually check. So he knows he's usually going to bluff this whether he hit or not, so, and I know that. So I check and let him do the betting, even though I think my 8 is good. Can you rule out he has a queen? No, you can't, but just statistically when your head's up, I was kind of fed up with this guy. Statistically when your head's up, when you hit a pair, it's usually good. With any 2 cards, you only hit 1 in 3 times in the flop. So I do check, let him make the bet. I think a re-raise is too strong. He'll get off of whatever he had. I think it's okay. I mean, if a card higher than an 8 comes out, then it puts you in an awkward spot. But if a card higher than an 8 does come out, it's not terrible because you can still hit the 6 now. But it's not great either. So I agree with the check. Now he checks, he's signaling he doesn't have the queen. If he had the queen, he would have bet here to protect it from straight and flush draws. So I don't think he has the queen. I think he's got air at this point, is most likely. So then, now that I think he signaled to me that he has nothing, and I think my 8 is still good, will he call with worse? Will he call with a 5 or a 2 or ace high? Maybe. So, I mean, this is questionable. The only thing he calls worse is a 5 or a 2 or ace high, which is questionable if he would. He folds. No, the table just broke to the final table, so this is the final table of the tournament now. Folds. This guy busted out. We're down to 8 players left. Folds. Going card dead. Fold. A lot of chips here. And this I would normally say is probably a fold, but what happened here was I was just card dead for 15 hands straight or so. So you need some opportunity to make some steal attempts so that your stack doesn't just get degraded. Also, when I've gone 15 hands straight without making a play, you build up your credit. So all these players are looking at me and said, oh, well, he hasn't played a hand in 20 hands, so now that he's playing, I'm going to give him credit that he has a strong hand. So you want to cash in that credit that you built up as well. So that's why I chose to raise this here, and I do agree with it at this point. You can't just keep folding every hand, especially when you're kind of card dead. You need to make these kind of plays. It is opening the pot. I would not have called with it, but to make an open raise with it, I think is correct here. And our favorite player, BB8 down here, who we already know and have established has an aggressive personality, and who may be a little annoyed at me at taking that last pot from him, makes a small re-raise. And because it's him, I'm not giving him credit for a proper 3-bet range of ace, ace, king, king, ace, king, queen, queen. I just don't. I expect he's 3-betting me here extremely late, especially on the button where he has position post-flop, maybe second to act. So I don't take this as a signal of extreme strength. I take it as a signal of some strength, but not. I don't give it as much credit as I would anyone else 3-betting at the table by any means. So I do go ahead and call because of that. At this point, I'm pretty low stacked here, and he's asking me to call only about 10k more, which is about a sixth of my stack. So really, it comes down to I call 10k. If I hit a jack or a queen, I'm going all in, or trying to get my money all in. If I miss the jack or queen, then you get away from it. Is really what it comes down to at this point. So I do go ahead and call the 10k, and I do hit the queen, which is great. I know he's an aggressive player, and I know he's bluffy, so I'm comfortable checking to him here, because I think he'll put the money in for me. Whereas if he has air, and I bet or shove all in here, he might fold the air. Whereas if he has air, I want him to bluff me, because then he's committed. So I would say probably should check here, with the understanding that this player has been really aggressive and bluffy, and has been targeting me and my blinds over here. So I do check, and I allow him the chance to put the money in, which he does. And this is a snap call. It's just not even a question. Just instant call. It's top pair. So let's see what he had. He has ace jack. So again, I did say I took it as some strength, but not extreme strength. Ace jack would definitely qualify there. And again, if I had made that bet on the flop, most likely I would have pushed him off ace jack and not made all the chips I just did there. So I think it was played well on this hand in general. And I think this guy is too aggressive. He's far too aggressive for his own good. Down here, he's 3-betting too much. He's targeting blinds too much. He's bluffing with air too much. He just needs to cool down a bit. He's had a huge chip stack. He had like 300k. He really just needed to cool down, let this guy bust, this guy bust, this guy bust, me and someone else fight for third. And then once he was 3 players left, then start opening up and being aggressive as he is now. So I would say him playing this aggressive as he has been a mistake for this player. Favorite guy, I'm obviously going to play this. I would not 3-bet it. I mean, just see a flop, there's no reason to. You don't want to bust out 6th here when I have 3 players lower stacked than me. 3rd place finish in a tournament pays a lot more than 6. So you don't want to risk busting out here. You want to know for sure what you have, and not. So I do not say you want to raise. Even if you had ace king, I would not raise this. King king, ace ace maybe. But here I would definitely call this, but not raise it. And I miss completely at this point in a 3-way pot. It's a pretty wet flop, and you missed pretty much all of it. Your gut shot of hitting a 10 is pretty low chance. Just check fold at this point. You get to see 1 free card at least. It didn't come. And just check fold, yeah. And somehow ace high holds up. So I somehow took that down with ace high. Possibly queen kicker as well. Let's fold. Yes, really. Well, we lost James W over here. Kind of standard, he's pretty low, so ace 9 wasn't bad. Ace queen definitely wasn't bad, so kind of standard, down to 5-handed. Lost some chips here, so let's see what's going on. It's an odd call here. I usually would never call on the button, but I know this guy will 3-bet me light, and I don't want to get 3-bet because I'm probably going to fold with jack king. Whereas if I call and then he raises, I might still be able to float and call and see a flop. Probably just fold and just play against this guy when you have just the nuts, and don't get involved with jack king, especially if you're not comfortable playing post flop. But here I rationed, instead of raising, giving him the chance to 3-bet me, at which point I have to fold because it's just too steep. If I call, he can't make a 3-bet raise. He'd have to just make a normal raise, which would be much smaller. And then I could still float and have position on him and play him. So that's why this call was made here. It's an abnormal play. This is not something I would almost ever do. Usually it's folds or raise on the button to the blinds. And again, it's an okay flop. If you had an ace that one of them would have raised, you would want to pay attention to how long they thought. If one of them had an ace pre-flop, they would have taken a few seconds to think if they're going to raise or not, whether they did or not. So if they had instantly checked or very quickly checked, you could probably rule ace out of their range, because if they had one, they would have thought for a second about raising me. But again, this replayer does not show timing tells, so I don't know what the timing tells were for this. But I would still think that since he didn't raise, I'm still probably okay here. He probably doesn't have the ace, and therefore he's probably scared of the ace. And he checks, so this would not be a bad spot to bluff. Really, Although if I did have the ace, I would have raised it pre-flop, so it's not the greatest spot either. But you do have the equity of hitting a queen, jack king. It's not terrible. And I chose not to do that. I chose just to play it safe, which is fine. And we still have me and these two guys are pretty close in stacks. You don't really want to risk it or go crazy until you're pretty sure of your hands. If these two were already busted out and it's just me and these two players left, I'd play things a good bit more aggressively because you've already obtained a larger portion of the tournament payouts. I mean, you could call this just with equity hit a queen. You fold it too, it doesn't hurt. And once you miss your queen, it's check fold. Yeah, check. 10. And it's debatable if this was played correctly. You can make an argument this was played wrong. It should have been raised pre-flop, or that the flop should have been bet. But I kept it pretty cheap, so I think I only lost 16k there. So I'm really not. If it was played incorrectly, it was not played very incorrectly. It didn't feel that strong of a line I took. It's called a line of logic you took. So moving on. Yeah, I mean, this guy's raising under the gun. He's a weak ace, just fold to a weak ace. Behind most things. This is fine. I mean, that would be he has a random hand. King jack's ahead of a random hand. I might call this. You have some backdoor diamond equity. You have some backdoor straight equity. Like you hit a king or a jack. Yeah, I mean, it's not terrible to fold either. It wouldn't have hurt really to call this. This is under a half pot bet. Yeah, I mean, you can't really call for set equity here because it's over a tenth of your stack. And you're going to expect a 9 or higher is going to come out. So you can't really, there's nothing really, there's no route to play this extremely profitably. And therefore, the best thing to do is just fold it. This is a questionable call. Usually do not want to call with king queen because any ace is ahead of it, any pocket pair is equal or ahead of it. But when you're down this low, because these stacks are 230k each and I'm only at 80k at this point, you could play a little bit more aggressively. Whereas if this guy was at 60k chips, you kind of want to play tight and wait till he busts out or might bust out. But now I'm the lowest stack at the table. It gives me the green light to kind of take some chances to change that. So I decided I had 20% of my stack in here. I was okay to just take my chances here. And I hit the clubs. And then he had 5-5 anyway, so it was about 50-50. So at some point you just have to, you just have to risk it. You have to play well and run well to win a tournament, both. Probably just fold 3Ks. Yeah, it's not bad, not great. approaching the end of this here. This has been going on quite some time. I was going to break it into 2 videos. It's just easier just to knock it out in one. I mean, you could argue to make this 26, 27k. It does just show that you're not kidding around, that you're strong. This usually screams like 8-8 to Jack-Jack. If you had aces or kings or queen, usually you're gonna not try to maximize your fold equity. Usually you'll bet 24 to 26k if you had aces, kings, or queens. So generally a full 3 times bet this late in the game indicates 8-8 through Jack-Jack, that you're strong and that you're kind of committing yourself, but you do want your fold equity. You do kind of want them to fold. So at face-up value, when you see this kind of bet, it usually indicates 8-8 through Jack-Jack. So sometimes it will throw it in on purpose to make them think that. Make it ace-ace here. I don't know about the call on it. I mean, a 3-bet at this point, I don't think I've ever really 3-bet in this tournament or at this final table. So a 3-bet would be an extreme red flag that I have aces or kings. So you do want to avoid that, but at the same time you want to avoid the possibility of getting your aces cracked. It's a balancing act again. Technically I think the proper play would be to 3-bet this, something like 40k, but again that's an extreme red flag. So if you do slow play it this way, it's do it at your own risk. If you get your aces cracked doing it, well, then you brought it on yourself. So you have to be prepared to take that chance. So especially now that you're getting a 3-way pot, and then this guy only has to call 12k, so he has odds, 81k out there. He has the 8-to-1 pot odds to call. He can call with a wide range of hands just to see a flop. So this is turned to a unoptimal situation for ace-8. Really, you only want 1 player, 2 at most to the flop. This turns to a situation where you could easily see 3. It's another argument to have raised this. And thankfully he folds, so we only get a 3-way flop. Still not completely optimal. The flop's pretty good. I mean, the only thing you're really scared of is 6-6, 4-4, and 10-10. Things like 10-6 and 10-4 would not have played pre-flop. So, I'm not really scared of anything except a set. But I'm not going to fold ace-ace with 5 players left in the tournament on the final table in this situation either. So you fully expect, alright, well if they hit their set, it was my fault for still playing the aces. It was just a little bit of a cooler as well. So you still fully are preparing to try to get as much money in here as you can. The question to raise this or not raising is a really strong flag. If you call, you might get BB8 to come along. I can see the argument for either. Probably call. I mean, you definitely could get all your chips in still on the turn or river with how big the pot is. So a call is probably fine. King, I would raise it up, because then if an ace comes, you're in a really bad spot. And it does induce BB8 to call, so we get some more action. It's a great card. If it was a club, I'd be scared. It's a really good card to see. And immediately, Miss Jones just puts in pretty much all my chips. So I remembered I tanked for a while. I took all my time thinking, like trying to make it look like I had a club draw is what I did. So and then I had a few seconds left to act. I finally called. The reason I called instead of shoving all in, it really doesn't matter, but I estimate if you shove all in, just the fact it plays a different sound and then it says all in, that it gives BB8 just like a 1 or 2% higher chance of folding, whereas I kind of want him to call. So it probably won't matter either way, whether I called or shoved all in. But I would estimate by calling, you might gain a 1% extra chance of BB8 coming along. Not much, but that's why I called this. It jammed over, and I also took a lot of time here to make it look like I was on the club draws and not an already made hand. And BB8 does call to come along. So, and then that is a really bad card for the river for me. So it is definitely a scare card, not something I wanted to see. But there's still a very good chance your hand is ahead here at this point. I mean, flush draws happen, especially when they're tagging along as hard as they were. But if you bust out to a flush here, it's kind of just poker, and kind of brought on by the slow play the aces are doing. Again, slow playing is higher risk, higher reward. Betting and not slow playing is lower risk, lower reward. So if I had lost this to a flush, it would have been because I took the high risk, high reward option of slow playing the ace-ace here. they both check. That's great to me because that instantly tells me they don't have a flush. If they have a flush, you bet here. If you have a flush, you can't check here because what beats you? I mean, you want to get chips in if you have a flush. So they just told me they don't have the flush, which means I have the best hand other than a set. Even if they had a set, they probably would bet. Again, all my chips are already in. It doesn't matter if you put these last 3K in or not. It really doesn't matter. I mean, you might as well actually not put them in case you were beat. Then on your next hand, you have a chance of someone busting someone else out before you. So technically, you should probably hold on to the last 3K chips. But that hand puts me in great position. So before that hand, I was at 166 K in chips. It was one of the shortest at the table. Dude, it was pretty low too. After that hand, I was at 500, so that really set me up to take this tournament down. The hand right there. This is a snap call. You just don't even question it. And he's shoving so wide here that there's 20K chips out there. He's shoving 60K. I'd call with almost any ace. And that's why he shoved 10-3. So he was shoving any two cards, and he happened to hit his 10. So I was probably 70% to hold here. He's probably 30%, but that is poker. I will even out in the end. In the long run. I mean, you could. This is a situation you could probably do almost anything here. I mean, you could fold it and just wait for a better spot. You could call it and see a flop and exercise pot control. You can make a small 3-bet because you've never really done that, and it would be show extreme strength. So really, this is one of those spots where almost any option you take, I mean, don't jam all in, but you could fold it is okay, calling it is okay, and raising it, 3-betting it is mediocre to okay. None of them are really great. So when that's the case, usually you want to just fold, and none of them are really great. But any of those options are viable on this hand. And I chose to just call as pot control and see flop. Again, it's the flop that makes your hand. This call, however, it set it up for Selleck to make a squeeze play here. And he's probably doing the squeeze play late. If he had a really strong hand, he probably wouldn't jam all in. He'd probably raise to like 60K if he had a really strong hand. So if he has like 9s or 8s or something, he probably would want to maximize his fold equity, and he would jam here all in. So he could have 8s, he could have 9s, he could have almost air and just be squeeze playing. Again, the squeeze play is the initial raiser is this guy, Miss Jones. And then I call. So I'm signaling weakness by calling. If I had a very strong hand, I would 3-bet. So I'm signaling that I have an okay hand to kind of good, but not great. Selleck then can take the opportunity of this where he could squeeze the initial raiser in between my flat and his raise. And then when the option comes to Miss Jones, he sees, oh, well, I got called and then someone raised and this hand's getting out of control. So Miss Jones, to play proper poker, needs a very strong hand to continue. And I showed I had a weak hand by calling, so I'm likely going to fold. So it is called a squeeze play, and it can be done almost, at times you could literally do it almost any two cards. I'm not sure this would be a correct any two card squeeze play, but I did, by my choice of calling here, set up a squeeze play for Selleck, and Selleck did take advantage of that. Whether he's doing it extremely late, I don't know. I do think he's doing it at least kind of late, because if he had aces, kings, or queens, he would make a 3-bet here, not a jam. Either way, you have to get away from it at this point. And Miss Jones is probably annoyed at me for alley-ooping the squeeze play on him here, rightfully so. Yeah, I mean, if you have ace-8 5-handed, just when you're at the stack I am, you definitely want to be opening this. King high, he's a random hand, king high is I have a random hand, and you have the chips to spare to start to get splashy, so I'm fine with that. You can argue a call there, fold's fine too. So. He's only got 64k chips left here. If he had an ace, he probably would have just jammed all in. So at this point, just put this guy all in. When he folds, you pick up the 30k chips here. When he calls, you're probably ahead. But don't let him see a free flop here. That is what I did. Jam all in, and he folds. This is fine. A full 3x again. It looks strong. It looks like you're committing yourself instead of the 2.6. So I'm fine with this. Okay. Don't really want to see a flop with 8-8 because a card higher than 8 is going to come out more often than not. So unless you're playing for set value, you don't really want to see a flop. I mean, you have to call this. He only has 3k more, and this is definitely fine. And this big blind was the small of the stack. Your ace 7 is way ahead. He's going to call at you with worse. So. And my 70% to win fails. He hits his 30% to win. And stay alive for now. Wow. I just forgot about this hand. So I dealt King in the small blind, and under the gun jams. It's not an awkward jam from him because there's 25,000 chips out there, so he only has 4 times that. It's called your in value. In value, I think it was made by Harrington, professional poker player. Is the if you take your small blind, your big blind, and all the antes, and then take your stack amount and divide it by that amount, it's called your in value. So if you take 106, divide it by 25k here, he's an in value of 4. So you could shove an in value of 4 with a lot of hands. So this is with King, I'm not worried about it. It's the second best hand in poker. This is great that he's shoving at this point. If you got ace, he might actually not be shoving it because he doesn't want to maximize his fold up. He'd probably min bet it or something, or 3 times raise it. So definitely think I'm way ahead of this guy. This guy isolation, it's called an isolation raise. When he jams over top, this guy bet 100k, he bets 270k. He's trying to isolate just this guy to a flop by pushing everyone else out. And if that's the case, if he's trying to isolate to just this guy, then he doesn't have ace-ace, and he probably doesn't have king-king, especially because I have king-king. I mean, that's really rare. And he probably might have queen-queen, but it's a little bit less likely as well. But usually this denotes a very good hand, but not a top-tier hand. So I would anticipate from Miss Jones here a ace-queen. Ace-king is unlikely because I have 2 kings. I would anticipate an ace-queen, a jack-jack, or a queen-queen, or maybe a 10-10. And really that's about it. Those 4 hands is what I would expect to see from him. And I chose just a flat call. It doesn't really matter. Flat call or shove all in. If you flat call, it might be another 1% chance to calls, but still pretty unlikely. I hit a king, which is great, because if he had queen-queen, I'm still ahead now. And the turn and river are great cards, so there's nothing really, even if he had ace-ace in the head. So. And he did have ace-queen, so my range estimate was right. I said ace-queen, ace-king is unlikely, because I had 2 kings. I say ace-queen, or jack-jack, queen-queen, or 10-10 is what I said. It's right in there. So you could see how you could define a range, and you could kind of figure out what they have, both by eliminating what they wouldn't play and what they would do with hands that were better. So I eliminated everything ace-10 and down, and I eliminated ace-ace, king-king, ace-king, and then what was left was ace-queen, 10-10, jack-jack, or queen-queen, those 4 hands. And so you literally could get to the point where you can narrow it down to sometimes 1 hand, but more often than not, then you narrow it down just to 2 or 3 hands, and then compare how you are versus those 2 or 3 hands you have left that you have in their range. And if you get good at that, defining a range and narrowing it down by using logic, that is the biggest skill in poker, really, to succeed at it. It really is a game of logic and thinking, is what it is mostly about. So obviously at this point, this monster stack I take will set me up very well to take this tournament down. And that also knocks out both Miss Jones and BB-8 at the same time. So now we're down to 3 players, and Selleck is micro-stacked. It's been quite a long video. It should be finished here in just a second. Definitely raise the ace. Ace right after. Run well here. You could argue a raise, you could argue a call. Either is fine. King or queen, I definitely raise to protect from sitting card like an ace if you had king, or if you had queen, ace, or king. With ace, you could argue a call as well. I chose to min raise, so it's a little bit between the two. So it wasn't really a proper 3-bet. I would shove him off, and it wasn't just a call either. So I think that's adequate. I think if you just call, like quite often, you could get a spot where they hit a set or hit 2 pair or just crack your aces. So the raise is standard. He does go. I remember this hand. It's 10 jack of spades actually. So he hit the best damn flop he possibly could have. So I raised strong, which is proper because there's flush draw equity out there. You don't really want to. You want to get the chips in at this point. Even if he did have a set or something crazy, I could still hit a spade or catch up. Or if he did have 2 spades, if another spade comes, I would catch up with the ace high flush. I can't fold ace here 3-handed. It's instant call. I hit my ace, but it won't matter because he does have 10 jack. It's just a really fortunate hand for him. I mean, I 3-bet him pre-flop and he called with 10 jack, so it's really just unlucky for me. Just called it just a cooler. If you 3-bet your ace and you get called by 10 jack and cracked, then you protected it pretty well. So. But with the massive amount of chips I had, it still leaves me a strong advantage here. So, but it does put the dude in a room and Selleck close to equal in chips, which is kind of good for me because they don't want to bust out third. They both want to bust out seconds. They'd like to see the other guy bust out. So they're going to kind of play tight and hope the other guy busts out. And then you can, as the monster stack, can abuse that and take blinds from them and whittle them both down at the same time. Yeah, I mean, the raise is fine here with ace. Probably do 32k. But then when he shoves over top, you gotta fold. Ace 2 is not strong enough to call. I mean, this is fine to call for 12k. You're deep enough stacks where you could hit 8-9 or some hearts and make it pay off. And then once you whiff this bad on the flop, just check fold. I mean, I couldn't have bet the turn. What am I supposed to represent? I mean, maybe that I had a small pocket pair on the turn. The river, he's gonna know I missed the river. You could argue you should have made a bet on this turn. I wouldn't bet the river. He's gonna know you're bluffing if you bet the river. Check fold is fine too. I mean, I only lost 30k chips there. So nothing. This guy's getting pretty aggressive. Second time he did that. Of course, I have to fold this as well. But you have to take note of these things because it allows you to better define your range. If he's doing it a lot, you widen the range more and more. Yeah, I agree with this call. There's no reason not to. Now, this bet, it's okay. It's definitely not bad. It's you call, then you bet. I mean, it's not something I did it once or twice in a little bit different scenarios, but it's not something I've been doing a lot. When they have the hand, they only hit the flop 1 in 3 times. It is kind of a wet flop, so you want to be careful. I'm not too opposed to this because when he folds, you pick up 90k chips, and you're only risking 45k chips. So he only has to fold once every 3 times to make it worth it, something like that, right? So he doesn't have to fold that often to make this a profitable play. So even if he's calling me 50% of the time here, well, the other 50% of the time I pick up 90k chips, and that 50% of the time I might lose 45k. So even if he's only calling me 50% of the time here, it's still kind of a profitable stab in this situation. And he does fold. He did miss. So 10 queen, you could argue a call here. You could argue a fold here. Family pots, and it's my turn for some spades. Run good. Check is okay here. The only thing you're afraid of is the king of spades, nothing else really. So a check's okay to see if they'll bet and if they'll start to put the money in for you so that you don't have to signal that you're strong. Especially since this guy was kind of playing aggressively. Let's go hands, and he does. Go ahead and bet. I think a check raise is an instant signal that you have the nuts. So unless you want to signal that you have the nuts, you have to be careful with check raises, or unless you absolutely have to protect your hand. You should be advised a check raise here would tell him that you are extremely strong. So I did call because I didn't want to tell him that. I wanted him to think I have a queen or king of spades and I'm hoping to hit my spade, whereas he probably has ace jack or ace queen and therefore is going to bet it aggressively, hoping to get value out of that draw, when really I already have the nuts and this is already 98% of the time going to me. And even better, we get a third caller. So I don't want to see another spade. I mean, even if there is, only the king of spade beats me. So I'm not overly concerned. Eight's a great card, eight of clubs. Will not complain. And since there's so much action on last hand, I do continue to slow play it. I continue to represent that I have one spade, and that I'm trying to get complete a flush, not that I already have the nuts. And I think this works out really well here because I think he fully buys the bait. I think he fully expects that I have one spade and that he has an ace and that he's ahead and that he needs to bet hard to get value out of that. So I think it fully worked out here. And even now, it still looks like I have one spade. I'm trying to complete my flush to this guy. So I like this slow play. I really do. And this guy would expect that Selick has one spade. Hopefully not the king. But the way he's playing, it looks like he has spades. Playing kind of like I am, just check calling. And a dude in a room, I expect to have an ace jack or an ace queen. So either way, I'm looking pretty damn good here. And I got most of the chips in this hand without me having to be the aggressor. So I didn't even have to signal how strong I was to get that accomplished. So you have to be careful when you're still playing, but it should be used at times, yes. And then the 3 is, it's not a great card because a 5-5 or 8-8 would beat me now, or ace-3. It's not the worst card either. It's better than a spade, but it's not the ideal card. But at this point, I'm going to give up the show and stop taking. We already have 670k in the pot. At this point, I think they might both be scared and just check behind me if I don't bet. So at this point, I just put the money in, and it's higher than either of their stacks, so they'd have to call on to do it. And Selick, I presume he had one spade and did not hit his other spade, which makes sense since I have 2. It's even less of a chance he would have made it. And a dude in a room I expect has ace jack or ace queen, who honestly with ace jack or ace queen I might even fold here, because this is no shit moment, because what am I doing this here with worse than ace jack or ace queen? I'm not doing this here ever with something worse than ace jack or ace queen, and if that's the case, why would you call ace jack or ace queen? So even if he had ace jack or ace queen, I think there is a good chance he folds here, but if I checked to him, I don't think he would have bet, so I do think a bet is proper. He could have bet maybe 100k or something, and he does fold. I think he had ace 10, ace jack. Again, timing tells are hidden here. It's possible he thought about this a while. So either way, this more or less secures the game for me as long as you play pretty carefully, as it puts me at a monstrous lead, 1 million chips, so they're 100k each. And at this point, you want to be aggressive, and you want this guy to hope this guy busts before him, and this guy to hope this guy busts before him, and you blind them both down at the same time and secure the win. Whereas once your head's up, one-on-one, they're going to be playing a lot more aggressively. Instead of trying to coast into second. So when you still have a 3-person bubble, you do want to see if you can abuse that if you are the large stack. And right off the bat, just not messing around, just there's 30,000 chips out there, so he has 5 times. There's an in value of 5. This guy's in value of 4. So when they all fold, I pick up 20% of what I could lose. The most I could lose is 150k, but when they all fold, I pick up 20% of that. So this is a sit-and-go wizard math problem at this point. But you can take my word for it, this is a correct shove in this situation. Because even if they do call it a better hand, you still have equity to hit 6 or 7. And I'm not concerned about my top 150k chips very much. It really would not harm me that much if you had asked. And they do both fold.
And also, the other side of that is when you're playing aggressively here, they know you're playing aggressively. It makes them more likely to play tight against you and not bluff you. So the value of that raise last hand also showed here a little bit. It could very well have been this guy would have raised me with like an ace-2, but then he sees I'm raising every hand being aggressive, and he doesn't want to play an aggressive player with ace-2. So it also, some of that value spreads over for your, it's called your table image. Your table image. So I created a loose aggressive table image at this point, so they think I will play back at them very light, which I would. So that makes them have to tighten up their range and play less hands, which works perfectly for me. 4-7, you're not going to call. 8 queen, you could raise this. Yeah, there's no problem with raising this. Queen high, they have random hands. They don't want to bust third. They want the other guy to bust third, so they have to play pretty tight. And even if I do get a call, it's 150k at most. I'm losing. You still have equity to hit. It's a proper shove. It's a correct shove, in my opinion. And ace-9 does prevail. Ace-9 was 65%, there's 70%-ish, something like that, to my 30 to 35%. But again, it doesn't really harm me much, because if I keep getting in with 35% to win, I will probably hit that 35% before this guy catches me on chips. So, not too concerned with that one. Can't call 7-2, it's the worst hand in poker. Shove on this guy is fine. In my opinion, it's 30k chips out there. He has 6 times that. So. Shove's fine. King high, they have random hands, in my opinion. Again, that table image of an aggressive player, they both folded to me. Because it rubs off, because I'm raising a lot, they'll think I'll call a lot too, even though that may or may not be the case. So I would shove this as well as 30k out there. He's got 5 times that, so every 5 times he folds would make up for 1 loss. But then even if he calls, you still have equity. You're usually, even if you use a head with like ace-king, well, 7-jack is 30% to ace-king, so you're really not extremely far behind. So I would shove this. And shove this. I mean, ace-8, they have random hands. Just keep the pressure on. Every time they both fold, you're picking up 30k chips. So I mean, we've done these almost any 2-card shoves, 4 or 5 times now. So we picked up 150k chips. So even if when someone calls and we lose 150k chips, we're back to where we started. But that's unlikely. I mean, ace-8 is probably the best hand here, 3-handed, and they're probably both gonna fold. Although one call. Queen-king. Hey, that's kind of it's a questionable call. Queen-king with this guy still in. Queen-king is a hard hand to call with because it's king high. Any ace is ahead of it. Any pocket pair is ahead of it. I was 65 to 70% to win this. So I don't know about his call. He was pretty short. I could see why I did it. It was short. And it was late last night. He just wanted it. He just wanted to get the money in. But that will move us on to heads up. Our final 2 players in this tournament, and I have a massive chip advantage. Here you could expect Selleck to open up a lot more and become a lot more aggressive now that the 3rd place player is out, because he can't gain anything more by just waiting. He's gained as much as he can by waiting. Now he has to double up and take me on. And right off the bat, just instant aggression, just jam all in. And he is pretty much in a push or fold mode. He really doesn't have enough chips to make a raise and then still get away from it. And if that's the case, you might as well just jam all in. So this is probably correct. Almost any 2-card. This is probably correct. And I know that. I know almost any 2 cards here jamming is correct. So, and I think he's good enough to know that as well. So I do think he's jamming almost any 2 cards here. And if I had an ace, I'd call it. A king high, I would think about it. And so you have to think about those things. 7-jack, jam, same reasons. Same reasons as before. So even if he calls with an ace, whatever your 30%, it still doesn't look very great for him. And when he's getting bad hands and has to fold, it quickly whittles down his stack. Again, Sit and Go Wizard would show the math of this more clearly, but you can take my word for it. These are pretty close to any 2-card shoves because the effective stack size is 150k, which with 36k chips out there is an M value of 4. It's really low. And he is again confirming that he knows about ICM, independent chip modeling, and how the equity goes when you're this deep, and stacks were like this. He's confirming that he knows he's in any 2-card shove position because he's been shoving pretty much every time since we got heads up. So I would almost call with 10 queen. I don't know if I did, but I did. So I don't even think it's that bad of a call because I think he's doing this with almost any 2 cards. Not quite, but 50 to 60% of his hands I think he's doing this with. And 10 queen fares pretty well for 50 to 60%. But he happened to wake up with pretty good hands, and that's poker. So I still stand by the play. I still think it was correct to get to call with 10 queen. Actually, well, it was a call. I mean, it definitely would be a correct shove on him. The call is a little bit harder to justify. It takes a stronger hand to call with than it does to raise with, because when you raise, you have fold equity. When you call, you have 0 fold equity. So it would definitely have been a shove. I was raising. On the call, you can make an argument that you could have folded 10 queen. I don't think it's bad to call either, because generally he doesn't have you covered. If he had ace jack, 10 queen fares a lot better versus ace jack than when he has the queen covered. So I have to play a little bit more cautiously. We're a little bit outside any 2-card shoves now, because he is like 8 or 9 M. So it changed a little bit, especially with 2-7 I wouldn't shove. And 2-4 is pretty bad hand. I was fine just checking it down with him. I mean, a stab on the flop there. I don't know about that stab. You think we should just check fold this? I don't think we should do that. When your head's up, he's playing almost any 2 cards. It's not terrible, but it's not great. 2-4 is pretty bad. I'm calling a little bit more than I like it, and I know why I'm doing it because I want to see flops with this guy because I feel like I could play him post flop, whereas pre flop is just a little bit more of a gamble. But technically, you should be playing a little bit more aggressive, especially with the large stack I have here than I have in these last few hands. I would presume my 5's good. Heads up, when you hit a pair, it's usually good, so I do bet. Of course, would have played the ace 10. So I do recognize that I've been a little too passive and start opening up again. At a choice opportunity, I have the big blind. I have an okay suited hand. It's not a bad spot to do it. But then when you get jams here, you gotta fold. So raise of 42 or 44k may have been more appropriate. I'm not opposed to the raise here though. You can't just keep checking and calling. Especially as the big stack, you gotta kind of take initiative and be aggressive and put the pressure on him. But it's definitely fold at this point. This one, after I get caught with aggression, I've raised, folded, so it's kind of getting caught. I still attempt once you raise, fold. I cooled back down a little bit. You want to go in a cool down period, as we call it. So I didn't raise here, just called. I do want to see flops with them. I don't want to fold pre-flop, really, almost ever. I want to at least call the big blind amount and see some flops with them, because I have a lot more chips than him. And at this point, I was thinking I was the better player than him too. It's also something you should take as a factor of whether you want to get your money in pre-flop or try to see flops with them and outplay them post-flop. If you think they are just as good as you or better, you may want to try to tend towards a pre-flop game where you get all your money in, 10s versus their ace-king, take a coin flip. If you think you are better than them, then you actually want to try to more play post-flop, whereas you'll see your 10s are ahead, or ace-king is ahead, versus tanking the gamble. So the more ahead of them you are, you think, in skill, the more you want to play post-flop in general. Check, check. I mean, it's just not really worth continuing here. You can make an argument to call for a 9 or a queen, but probably just fold this here. Call's okay here. I mean, I hate folding to a min-raise. You could. It wouldn't be awful. Check fold once you whiff. And I floated another one. I mean, both the king and 7 are over cards, but you probably still should just give up at this point. Well, at this point, he checked on that 8. I think he has absolute air because he checked on that 8. So once the 4 pairs, if I had like 2s or a small pocket pair, 5s, 6s, I would have just made my house. So I could represent that I just made a house with a small pocket pair by bluffing here, which is what I do. And if I had done that, if I had made a house, I would bet really strong. So you see my bluff attempt matches what I'm trying to represent. And I'm trying to represent that I have a full house with a small pocket pair of 2s, 5s, 6s, or 7s. And I think that is sufficient because he pretty much told us he doesn't have the 8 when he checked the turn. And it is, he folds. Should be about the last hand coming up very soon here. I don't know about that bet in the flop. I don't know about that bet in the turn. I might have been getting frustrated. Go over this again. Let's see what he's thinking here. I call 10-4 is pretty weak, so call is understandable. I don't like folding pre-flop. It's just the big blind amount. We see a flop. He only hits the flop 1 out of 3 times with any 2 random cards. So 2 out of 3 times he misses. So when I bet here, it's when then he checks, showing kind of missed as well. So when I bet here, 2 out of 3 times he folds, which is why I bet here, and that makes sense because he folds 2 out of 3 times, and I pick up this 36k chips, and it makes it worthwhile. And it also keeps the pressure on him. Then he calls. So this call indicates a flush or straight draw for the large part. It could be a weak king or an ace 8, something like that. Mostly a flush or a straight draw. Once the king peels, I don't think he has a king, especially once he checks it. Because if he hit the king, he would have to protect his 3 kings from a straight or a flush. So when he's checking, he's not doing that. So his check tells me he doesn't have a king. If he doesn't have a king, then he's got ace 8, ace 7, 9, 10, or 2 diamonds. Really, it's about it that he could have. So I do go ahead and double barrel. I'm trying to represent the king, so I see what I'm doing at this point. I hit the king because I think he's on a draw. So I believe he's on a draw, a straight draw, or a diamond draw. And I don't think he's got the king, and I'm trying to represent the king. And he does kind of confirm he's on a draw with that. So then now, if he did have 9, 10, or flush, this completes. Yeah, okay, so it's the check. So if he had not checked here, you're getting away from this hand immediately. You cannot do anything more. You are completely beaten. Once he checks here, if he had completed his straight, if I was right and he did have 9, 10, he would bet here for sure to get value out of it. If he had 2 diamonds, he would bet here for sure to get value out of it. You can't check the river, you gotta get value out of those hands. So he tells me he probably has ace 7 or ace 8 at this point. I mean, he might have raised those pre-flops. It might even be something like 8 queen or something, you know. But I don't think he's got a straight. I don't think he has a flush. I don't think he has a king. And therefore, whatever he has, it's either weak or semi-weak. And therefore, if I triple barrel, this is the second main triple barrel to this tournament, I guess. If you triple barrel, you'll get all those weak hands. I think it was left in his range to fold. So I did go ahead and triple barrel, and he does go ahead and fold. But that's the reasoning behind it. I identified his range was likely full of weak holdings, and you identified that a triple barrel bluff, I've been showing strength this entire time, will likely get those weak holdings to fold, and then you go through with it. You could never do these kind of double barrel or triple barrel bluffs blind without having a good grasp on their range and what they likely have. If you do, you're going to run into huge problems with your double and triple barrel bluffs. So you have to fully define the range and have a pretty good feel about it for double or triple barrels to be successful. Yeah, that puts me at a massive stack advantage on his. So I would instant call with an ace, because after he loses a big hand, a lot of times they're tilted, they're kind of pissed off, and they just jam the next hand. So, I mean, I would snap call with an ace. And it turns out he did have an ace as well. Since the 2's paired, and we had our ace with king kicker, we only use 5 cards and hold him. We do split this pot. Yeah, I mean, it's fine just to not not get over aggressive here. Again, I'm just gonna snap call an ace. I mean, we're short enough. It would hurt if he doubled up. I would be at 750 and he'd be at 500k, but he's jamming pretty light here quite often. So I'm not too opposed to this call. And he did have 10 king. I was 70% to take that, and that will conclude this tournament finally. So I apologize about the length of this video, but I was requested to go over this. So I hope you have learned a lot about poker and how decisions are made in poker and what you do and why, as well as you now see a tournament from start to finish. This was a 260 person tournament, multi-table tournament on Winning Poker Network, $11 entry. I think it was $515 for first, I think is what I took. So nowhere near some of the larger tournaments I've done in my poker career, but still a sizable amount and a good one to have worked through. So until next time.